This Trinity County Planning Commission regular meeting of March 26th, 2026 is open for business. We will now honor our country and our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we'll now move to our public comment period. During the public comment period, members of the public may address the Planning Commission on any matter not listed on the agenda that is within the subject matter jurisdiction of the Planning Commission. Is there anybody here in the audience that would like to speak? Okay.
Hello, Commissioner. Thank you for your time. My name is Adam Lee. I live in Hayfork, and I'm here to talk about the 1 acre. It's been too long, and we have to keep moving. I have 185 acres of land. I don't live close to a church, to a creek, to a neighbors. I live in Hayfork, but it's right by the National Forest, and I pay $6,000 property tax a year, plus insurance, that's about $10,000. I'm sinking, not swimming. So I just want to urge you to consider that in the near future and push that forward so that, it's not quality, it's quantity now that we have to compete with other counties like Santa Barbara County. I did a research over the weekend, and I'm going to read you a few farms here. Leaf Brands, Salisbury Canyon Ranch. As of April of 2025, Leaf Brand began planting on a 1,900 acre ranch, which is one of the largest cannabis grower in the world. And as of 2025, their plantings had 65 acres. By 2027, they'll be reaching 187 acres. And my questions to you is, how do you justify the people in Trinity County to compete with these giant farms? We understand, and there's other farms too, like Glass House Farms, 500,000 square feet, and Farming First, 134 acres, outdoor cultivations in Santa Barbara County. Broad Garden, huge farm, High Star Farms, one of the biggest farm over there. And I look at this farm, I look at myself and the people here, it's like, how are we gonna fight with them and compete with them to survive? And so I just wanna urge you, Commissioner, to consider this. And in the near future, when we keep moving forward, I'd like to speed this so that we can compete. I understand the environmental damage that, if we're legit, we live in a place where it's not gonna damage the environment. I ask the county board and the commissioner to give us a chance to compete with other county. Thank you.
Is there any more public comment in the room? Yep, go ahead and step forth to the podium.
Good evening. My name is Sai Vang.
And where do you live, Sai?
In Post Mountain, Sai Vang. I live in Post Mountain. I'm here to request the Planning Commission to consider a special pilot program for medical patients in the Post Mountain area to grow for their own medical use. And I ask that the Planning Commission consider that and put in your agenda to discuss and support the people in Post Mountain to grow for their own medical use. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you.
pages in translation.
Okay, for
เรีย
translation,
น
we'll
ใช้
give
ยิ่ง
you
ว่าง
5 minutes.
My name is Chai Yang Wang.
กูถ้าอ่านตัวเสียตัวเก่าช่วงกูยอมปลอดเต้ตัวแต่ชื่อกูยอม Trinity พาย
He lives in Post Mountain. He has been serving the United States CIA for 10 years back in during the Vietnam War.
แต่ชื่อกูไม่相就相相กูมั่วมั่วกูตัวย่อโซ Trinity พายกูสามก็จะนอจูนอมปูไปจอยสาลูตัวไปตัวกูชี
I'm 77 years old. I have a lot of medical issues. I'm urging the commissioner to consider medical marijuana grow for me in the near future.
Thank you. Is there any more public comment in the room? Go ahead, Tommy.
Thank you, board. Thank you, all the staff. I just have a general question. There's a lot of confusion up in Post Mountain about all the designation for land use, especially RR and AG, and we need some clarification so that we can go about our not so confusing, because one person say something else about AG, another person on the other hand say something about RR, and there's a huge confusion. And we need some clarification on this so that we know go forward with this process. If the commission decide to do RR or AG for the Post Mountain area, because it's a overlay zone, and we have a small acre per parcel. So we need some clarification on that. Thank you.
You know, if I may, this evening, we're going to be going over the tables of allowable uses, and that incorporates the rural residential for cannabis. And so if you stay, you'll get to hear a discussion about allowable uses.
Thank you. Excellent.
Is there any more public comment in the room?
Chair, Commissioners, Lisa Wright Lewiston. I'd like to speak briefly to the role of the California Permit Streamlining Act and how it should inform both current permitting practices and zoning updates before you. The Act establishes a clear, front-loaded framework for processing development applications. Within 30 days of submittal, the county is required to determine whether an application is complete and to provide a comprehensive list of any deficiencies. Importantly, that determination is intended to define the full scope of review at the outset, including all required permits, applicable standards, and whether discretionary or environmental review applies. That scope is not intended to evolve throughout the process. Once an application is deemed complete, the Act also requires that the county proceed to a final decision within defined timeframes. When a new environmental impact report is not required, including projects relying on existing environmental review or a negative declaration or a CE or a PEIR, the timeline is 60 days. A longer 180-day timeline applies only where a new EIR is required. Together, these provisions are designed to ensure that applications move through a predictable and time-bound process rather than extended or iterative review. The Act clearly applies to discretionary land use approvals such as use permits, where site-specific analysis, environmental review, and formal findings are required, and where a permitting process includes those same elements, regardless of how it is labeled, it functions in the same way and operates within the same procedural framework. As the county moves forward with updating zoning tables, the assignment of permit types becomes particularly important. Expanding the use of discretionary permits for otherwise allowable and what may be better served as permissible uses directly affects how these timelines and requirements apply in practice. Clear classification and upfront identification of all requirements are essential to ensuring a consistent, predictable, and legally compliant permitting system. So I'd like you to take that into consideration for our current existing framework, CUPs, DUPs, CCLs all have CEQA analysis. They all fit under the Permit Streamlining Act. And as you're looking at the different tables, also please consider what the impact might be to processing and the requirements of state law that need to start to be adhered to. Thank you.
Any more public comment in the room? If there's not, we'll close public comment and go to Zoom.
Yes, we have one for Trinity Alps Canna Craft.
Are you there?
Hello, Commission and staff. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
This is Matthew Jefferson from Coffee Creek and Trinity Center. I'm the owner of Trinity Alps Canacraft. I'm specifically talking today about our subject of tourism, specifically addressing that it was stated that, how do we want to put this, that cannabis cultivation, tourism, we'll say all such things associated with destroy tourism. I've sent you guys a 5-page tourism report that I've put together. I've got 18 articles surveyed and peer-reviewed studies from across the West Coast and Colorado to demonstrate the impacts of what tourism has had on rural communities across the United States. I believe it demonstrates a pretty clear, how do I want to put this? I don't know. It demonstrates very clearly that it is nothing but a positive impact on all of the rural communities that have interacted and engaged with tourism. That, in short, it has not in any way hampered or destroyed any existing tourism, but instead brought in a new sector and a new element of tourism that those counties were never able to tap into. I know this is just the very quick start beginning of this conversation. And I know that there's a lot on the staff's table, so I'm just hoping that some of these articles and surveys that I've shared with you can be helpful as we start to dive into discussing what the impacts of tourism would be on our rural community. And just like, we've got a room full of farmers sitting in there right now. You just had an American veteran come up and talk. And 90% of this county very clearly supports cannabis and the cannabis cultivators. And we need your guys' help here. These people need to get licensed. That gentleman that needs that 1-acre permit, let's get him approved. There's a very small minority of people that are controlling what's going on in this county. And I really hope we can start to move forward with recognizing what the residents of this county want and to support the small businesses of this county. We've got a room full of people pleading to get licensed, to participate, to give you money. And please treat them in a different way than I have been treated in the past 10 years. And I mean, I'm running for the hills. You guys got me. I don't know if I've ever experienced any amount of discrimination like that I have experienced in the past 10 years. So come on, support these people. Get them licensed. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt.
We don't have any more public comment.
Okay, we're gonna close public comments and move on to the regular calendar. Community development, planning approval of minutes. For March 12th, we have. Mhm. Man, 8 hours put onto 2 pages. All right.
It's pretty easy to approve because it's pretty basic.
Mhm.
I'll move that we approve both the regular session and the special study session minutes for March 12th, 2026.
I'll second.
All those in favor of approving the minutes as written, say aye.
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 We'll move on to agriculture ordinance and prohibition of industrial hemp cultivation DEV 26-01. Drew?
Angela Blanchard, Ag Commissioner, will be presenting this item.
Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. Angela Blanchard, Agricultural Commissioner. Our current moratorium on industrial hemp is set to expire on April 20th, 2026. A proposed permanent ban was presented to the Board of Supervisors for the first reading and was approved 5-0. An urgency ordinance has been adopted to ensure there is no gap in coverage while this item moves through the review process. Following public comment requesting Planning Commission review, I am now presenting this item for your consideration. 336 surveys were sent to stakeholders, with copies also available at the front counter, at the county website, and through one consultant. Nearly 10% were returned, with 50% supporting the ban, 34% opposing it, 12% undecided, and 3% maybe. I also announced this at the board in December and January that I was going to take it to the board for approval. Pollen drift and the potential for hemp to exceed the legal THC limit remain the primary concerns. Based on these factors, I'm requesting the Planning Commission to adopt a resolution recommending that the Board of Supervisors approve Attachment A, the ordinance permanently banning industrial hemp cultivation.
Right on, thank you. Do we have any clarifying questions for our Agricultural Commissioner?
I think I already asked them.
Yeah. Do you know offhand what other counties in California that have cultivation, like a healthy cannabis industry, how they have handled industrial hemp production?
There are a few counties that actually, I don't remember what the counties are, it's like 5 counties that have prohibition on hemp. And then the ones that maybe don't have cannabis, they do have hemp in their counties.
So the ones that do have prohibitions on hemp do have cultivation of cannabis?
Mhm.
And it's because of the cultivation of cannabis is that they have prohibitions of hemp?
Yes, it's that reason. And then also with hemp, some people will actually grow cannabis under the name of hemp because they'll hide cannabis and saying it's hemp because the registration's cheaper and a lot less stringent laws.
And do you know how you can tell the difference between hemp and adult use, high THC cannabis?
By adult, sorry, can you repeat that?
Yeah, commercial cannabis versus hemp, right? That's, can you tell the difference between the two?
Well, no, not when it's being grown for CBDs. You actually have to have a device to go out there and test it.
Yeah, so it looks like the
So,
same plant.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Right on. And in terms of like mitigations of pollen drift, I mean, are there counties that, or have they found ways to mitigate the pollen drift? I guess they probably haven't if they either ban it where there's cannabis cultivation and they allow it where there's hemp, where there's a prohibition of cannabis. Are there places, do you know of places where they have both?
Yes, in Oregon, they do.
In Oregon, they do?
Mhm. And I don't know a case that there was a pollen drift that was an issue. So.
Yeah, right on, thank you.
Mhm.
Any more questions for staff? Okay, well then we'll move on to public comment. Is there any public comment in the room about this cannabis ordinance? This hemp, prohibition of hemp cultivation?
Chair, Commissioners Lisa Wright, Lewiston, I raised these same concerns to the board after the presentation of the first reading. The one thing that they did do is bring it to you as a land use consideration, but they didn't make any of the other concerning changes that should be made. First, the ordinance does not identify the correct statutory authority for a countywide prohibition on industrial hemp. It cites Food and Agricultural Code Section 81003, which governs registration requirements. That section does not authorize a local ban. The only provision in California law that conditionally authorizes a county to prohibit or limit hemp cultivation is Food and Agricultural Code Section 81011, which requires a specific factual finding that pollen drift from industrial hemp may pose a threat to licensed cannabis cultivation. A specific factual finding. While the ordinance and resolution now include language stating that such a threat exists, those statements are anecdotal and unsupported by substantial evidence in the record. The staff report provides general descriptions of potential risks, but does not include scientific analysis, expert testimony, or local data demonstrating cross-pollination impacts under Trinity County conditions. Statements that pollen may travel miles or that impacts may occur are not by themselves sufficient to support the specific findings or evidence required by the statute. Second, there's an internal inconsistency in the record. The ordinance acknowledges that there are currently no registered hemp growers in Trinity County, yet concludes that pollen drift poses an active threat requiring a permanent countywide prohibition. That disconnect raises a concern that the findings are based on hypothetical conditions rather than evidence. Third, the CEQA exemption asserted in the ordinance warrants closer review. A permanent prohibition on an agricultural use, federally legal, is a land use decision with foreseeable impacts on how land may be used and developed. The record does not include analysis supporting the conclusion that there is no reasonably foreseeable physical impact, nor does it explain the applicability of the categorical exemption it cited. Finally, the record does not reflect consideration of less restrictive alternatives, such as setbacks, buffer zones, or other regulatory approaches, which are directly relevant to the pollen drift concern identified in the findings. My purpose today is to ensure that any ordinance recommended by the Commission is grounded in the correct statutory authority, supported by substantial evidence as required by the law, and based on findings that can withstand legal scrutiny. I respectfully ask the Commission to consider whether the current record meets those standards before making a recommendation to the board, and to send it back to staff to address these very important concerns. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, Commission staff. I speak in favor of the hemp moratorium for any number of reasons. Those brought up previously, but also its negative impact on the regulated cannabis industry through its end running of regulations, including marketing and labeling attractive to children, dosages that are not controlled by regulation. There's no pesticide regulations, there's no testing, all these things. What we're trying to do in the cannabis industry is create a safe and acceptable methodology for regulating this plant. And the Farm Bill essentially created an end run around that, and it's been exploited for several years. And I cannot speak to the technical detail that Lisa just did, but I can definitely say that there is significant evidence of pollen drift generally, and to say that it have to be specific to cannabis, I think might be going a little too strong, because there aren't case studies. There's no case studies for that. But if you look at the Willamette Valley of Oregon, where they grow the vast majority of the world's vegetable seed crops, they grow the seed there that is then grown across the world to produce food. They do not allow the growth of canola in that region, because canola needs to be brought all the way to maturity to get the seed, and that would then taint all the brassica seed for like 80% of the world's food production. And they're not going to do any tests on that. They're not going to see if canola pollinates the world's seed crops. They prohibit it because of the potential. So I just wanted to put that out for the record. Thank you.
Is there any more public comment in the room?
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the Commission, Tom Belenko, Douglas City. my roots, if you will, in hemp go back a long way. 30 plus years when I wrote some legislation while I was still in law school that differentiated industrial hemp from cannabis in Colorado and kind of served as the model. It's not some great creation of mine. I knocked off the Canadian legislation, which had knocked off the European Union legislation, but here we are, the whole 0.3% and whatnot that's eventually made its way into the Farm Bill. There is no doubt that regulation has altered the genuine economics regarding cannabis, both in medical, recreational, whatever you call it, high octane, low octane THC, industrial hemp, and all the uses. There's no question about that. But I don't think more regulation is what we need to get us out of that problem. Yes, the Farm Bill created a strange loophole, and I like to think it was unintended. But the hemp that is being driven through that loophole, which is being closed, is not coming from places like Trinity County or anywhere in the Emerald Triangle. It's like Oregon and the Midwest. What we do here isn't going to change that. But what we do here, there are viable uses for hemp now. Can we have hemp agriculture here? Not on the scale you can in the Midwest, for instance, or even in Oregon, or even in the Central Valley. But it doesn't take a lot of hemp to build sustainable industry. Right now in Humboldt, they're building a house in, I think it's either Arcata or Eureka, out of hempcrete that they're growing locally. It's a project of the Yurok tribe. It's a local project. They are growing a house in Humboldt County. Now, sure, we can grow them out of trees, but the turnaround is, we're talking a year. So I understand the pollen concept, but I do want to point out that pollen is a particle, and the law considers that a trespass. So if my neighbor's growing cannabis, licensed commercial cannabis, and I'm growing hemp, and pollen from my property goes onto their crop and causes them damage, they can sue me for that. That's legal. So we don't need this ordinance to protect. The law already protects a commercial cannabis grower from pollen. So I'm against this. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any more public comment in the room? If not, we'll go to Zoom.
We have Trinity Alps Cannabis Craft.
Yep, go ahead.
Hello, Commission and staff. Matthew Jefferson, Trinity Center, Coffee Creek. So like I get people are concerned about pollen drift. That's real. I'm a cannabis farmer. I make my own genetics on site. I make my own seeds. Pollen drift is real. It can definitely contaminate things. But I think that there's a big difference that's getting lost right here in between industrial hemp and small scale hemp production. I'm just going to use a personal experience of my own. I go around the state and I do a lot of trade shows with cannabis events and stuff like that. So first of all, Lake County allows hemp and cannabis cultivation. That's just north of San Francisco. When I was set up at CannaFest, I had two farmers on either side of me. I had a cannabis farmer from Lake County to my right, and I had a hemp farmer from Lake County to my left. They were actually neighbors. And the hemp farmer, I thought it was so interesting. It was like just something that I just hadn't really quite fully grasped yet. But it was a family, and they were growing 5,000 square feet of hemp, and they were making salves and tinctures. And let's remember too that smokable, intoxicating, high THC hemp is not allowed in California, and being banned nationwide pretty quickly. But when you're a small scale hemp producer, you want seedless plants. You're not growing fields and fields that you can't manage. Now, when you're an industrial hemp producer and you're growing 600 acres of hemp outside of Bakersfield, yeah, pollen drift, real problem. That would be very hard to cull your males out of that field. But when you're talking about small scale hemp production, you're talking about a completely different animal and a completely different beast. So if we were to treat hemp the same way that we're treating cannabis cultivation, to cap it at 10,000 square feet, I think a lot of these problems of pollen drift and all such things would easily be alleviated, because no one that's coming in to do hemp for textile or large scale production or anything like that, or even like extracting it into BHO to get that tiny minute 0.03% THC that they are allowed to grow, like they're not doing that unless they can grow it on such scale that isn't realistic in Trinity County. And it's limiting opportunities, and I feel that there can be regulation put in to protect them. And just very much, I'm a proud member of Humboldt County Growers Alliance, and I very much stand with what Tom Blanco said. We shouldn't be making fear-based decisions. Hemp is not scary. It's a plant. Let's work with it. Thank you.
We also have Rhoda.
Go ahead, Rhoda.
Hi, this is Rhoda Kane from Trinity Center, Coffee Creek area. I really appreciate the ag department has been really looking out for the agricultural crop that currently exists in Trinity County. I'm really grateful that they care so much about their current existing agriculture that they are willing to fight for something like this and put it up there. And I do think that it was wise in the beginning not to make it permanent. And while we had time to figure it out, unfortunately, this county has gotten really busy doing a million different things. We unfortunately didn't get to figuring out the hemp stuff yet. I think it's wise to continue to not make it a permanent thing. I think maybe we need a lot more info. Maybe rushing things makes mistakes. Maybe this county needs to do some research and regulate and put in mitigations. I pretty much agree with a little bit of everything all the other speakers have said. Something that Angela was talking about with the testing, there was a question about the testing and, and I think they're dealing with this at the federal level now, but right now they are allowed to test it before it goes into flower, and that's how they call it hemp instead of cannabis, and that's all ridiculous at the federal level. Those rules need to change. I do believe the counties are allowed to fully ban something. They're just not allowed to piecemeal it out by district or arbitrary lines. It's the whole county goes or the whole county doesn't go. Then let's see. And then just the main thing is like that typically the cannabis or the hemp is very unregulated. It doesn't take, there's hardly any inspections, there's hardly any of that. So that's the reality, is that it could cause significant problems if it's not regulated properly. And so I feel like maybe we go at it again. Maybe we do some research, write some regulations that mitigate the issues. And I'm not against urgency ordinance hanging around for another year or whatever till it expires. But maybe if we're actually going to do this, we need to really do our research. And once again, I'd like to say that I really appreciate the ag department standing up for the current agricultural product in this county. And I really appreciate their efforts in that. But maybe we need to really think about this before we make a permanent ban ordinance. Thanks.
Thank you, Rhoda.
No more comments.
Okay, we'll close public comment and bring it back to the commission.
I think a permanent ban is wrong. I mean, it's a possible industry. It's a possible moneymaker. I think what she was saying about regulation would be a lot better idea than just banning it permanently, or at least look into it. Don't just jump on a ban.
Yeah, but I mean, saying a permanent ban doesn't mean we can't change our mind in a year. We can put this ordinance into place and then it can change.
This is a 1-year ban.
No, I'm just saying that, we change ordinances all the time. So we're calling it permanent, but it's just putting it into place. It doesn't mean it's going to get changed or revised or updated or completely removed in the future.
Okay.
So just two minor comments. One is my husband's grandfather grew hemp. He called it rope weed, and he made his own ropes, and it was a pretty cool thing. So, there's that perspective. And the other thing is, this is kind of facetious, but I did want to point out that only 50% of the respondents wanted this, which is lower than the 60% threshold for opt-out areas we've been saying you need to have. So to me, there's not an overwhelming desire to have this ban. And so I'm tending to agree with the people who've commented that it's, it needs findings. It needs a little bit more work. And so I'm not quite sure that we need to pass a permanent ban.
Yeah, it seems like it's not a cut and dry type of, a clear challenge. I mean, there is industrial hemp for fiber, and then there is small scale, low THC, high CBD for medicines and salves and such like that. So making a blanket ban is potentially taken away. It's not potentially, it would be taken away potential industries. There is those concerns, and those concerns were valid enough that, Humboldt County did put a permanent ban on hemp production, and they are very pro-agriculture and probably have more diversity in their different types of agriculture than many other places. And out of respect for their existing essential industry, which was cannabis, they chose to ban. So,
And they just voted down an opportunity to do a small pilot program again.
did they?
Yeah.
I did not. So, I believe that Humboldt County is probably ahead of us on a lot of aspects of cannabis in terms of regulations and trying different facets. And so that, I take that, to heart. I take that seriously. So I think that a permanent ban would be, if there was to be a ban, it would be a continuation of the urgency ordinance so that more studies could be done on the potential application of small scale CBD hemp.
Yeah, I think to build off what you were saying, if I can, is where I come from and looking at our land use and then the genetic distribution and the concerns there. I would like to know, are there places where we're not growing cannabis that it would be suitable to grow hemp, that, we're not as concerned about the pollen drift and those issues. And if there are small opportunities to do that, but do still really want to recognize the access that children have to these products and needing to make sure that we're protecting our children as this comes along, and why the state and the feds have started to add more restrictions and add all of this additional regulation, and really making sure that, we're supporting industry, but we also need to support the families that are residing here and protect our children.
Chair, I was wondering if I could ask a question to our Ag Commissioner. And I was just wondering, I mean, what is the impetus? I mean, is there some desire between the supervisors or are people asking for this or just, I realize that it's expiring. Is that the main impetus for why this is coming back?
Yeah, it's because it sunsets April 20th. But we've had urgency ordinance starting in 2019, and we haven't really had anybody come into the office saying, hey, we want hemp here. What is this? And then I sent out the surveys, those 336, and I only received, 32 back. And I don't have people coming into my office now after I've taken this to the board and, saying, no, we don't want this. So
Okay.
so I proposed a permanent ban, not meaning that is permanent, forever. If people came to my office and they wanted it, then a whole bunch of farmers came in and other people, then I would look at that and ask to maybe come back and change that.
I feel like the extension of the emergency ordinance would probably be the appropriate measure.
And if there was, I think it'd be appropriate to direct staff to look into the implications of it. I mean, just recognizing that nobody's coming in asking for it means that there isn't going to be much pushback for an industry that's not asked for. But are people coming in and asking for feedlots in Trinity County? We do have places where feedlots are allowed.
Well, and the fact there's a ban is going to keep people from coming in and asking for it if they assume it's banned.
Mm-hmm. Well, do we have a motion for discussion?
I guess my concern would be if we're going through with this, like to open it, right? If we don't continue this ban, are we prepared to handle hemp? Are we prepared to process and whatever registrations need to happen at agriculture? So. Sure.
Yeah.
We have 2 employees, full-time employees in the agriculture department. So, I mean, we would have to hire other people to be able to go out and do inspections and regulate this program.
Yeah, so I think we need to do some more thought as to like if this program is going to move forward and have some time to allow for that to be developed before it's open season. But I don't see an issue with, again, continuing some investigations to sort out how that could roll out and be implemented safely and effectively.
If this was a project, I would just say let's continue this to a further date and then seek more input. But it's, the urgency ordinance is expiring.
Currently it's not an urgency ordinance. It's just an ordinance with a sunset clause, right?
No, we had a temporary urgency ordinance that was just adopted at the last board meeting.
Yeah.
It says, your timeline says draft permanent ordinance presented, board directed a 5-year sunset clause. So then it says ordinance was introduced, ordinance adopted. It doesn't say it was an urgency ordinance. It just said it had a 5-year sunset clause.
I forgot to mention that in the staff report. But in my introduction, I said the urgency ordinance was adopted.
In 2021?
So just to clarify, there are 2 separate ordinances. So at the last board meeting, an additional new urgency ordinance was passed to accommodate the fact that the original urgency ordinance that is sunsetting on April 20th will expire prior to the potential adoption of this ordinance and it going into effect 30 days after the second reading at the board.
Okay, so just because of the issue we've had with the cannabis ordinance on what's an urgency ordinance and what was a permanent ordinance, it really helps to kind of clarify what we're talking about here. So we are currently operating under an urgency ordinance. Is that right? Okay. Because I was going to make a motion that we adopt the ordinance, but with a 2-year sunset clause that would give us time to evaluate, to beef up the findings, to address Ms. Wright's concerns, and so forth, to make sure we're incorporating whatever federal changes, in the farm bill might be occurring and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, that would be my motion, is that we adopt the resolution and the ordinance as proposed, but with the addition of a 2-year sunset clause.
I'll second that motion.
Discussion? I'm good with that. Okay. Let's take it to a vote then.
Commissioner Flights, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Fall, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner Harper, how do you vote?
Aye.
Commissioner McIntosh, how do you vote?
Aye.
And then I think if we can convey to the Board of Supervisors that the reason there's the 2-year sunset clause is to try to, like I said, document the findings, whether there is an issue with pollen drift or not, whether there's a potential small industry that could occur, whether there are things that could mitigate, like buffers or size limits, how the Farm Bill is currently being revised, so how that might affect, but give us 2 years to kind of work out the answers to those questions.
The difference between industrial hemp and low THC, high CBD hemp, and how those industries can coexist.
Well, I think also size, right? Industrial capacity, landscape versus small farm.
Yeah.
And also to see if anybody even applies or wants it. That would be a deciding factor too.
Chair, although you guys have already made a motion and a vote has occurred, I'm happy to provide some additional insight if that's helpful for the record.
Please.
So I think it's fair to acknowledge the potential negative impacts of pollen drift, but I want to bring your attention to finding C, which from my perspective, in terms of the reality of establishing an industrial hemp program at whatever scale with whatever setbacks or limitations and other considerations included, industrial hemp and cannabis are indistinguishable visually. Additionally, one of the other challenges to the potential of having a high CBD sort of hemp industry in Trinity County is that essentially, as I understand it, there's a precursor to, so when cannabis plants get into flowering, they first create CBG, and that's the precursor to CBD or THC. So when you have young in the first few weeks of the flowering cycle of a commercial cannabis plant or a industrial hemp plant, you generally have high CBG concentrations. And basically which direction they go, if you will, in terms of converting CBG into CBD or CBG into THC happens at that later stage of flowering. And so from an enforcement perspective and from a verification perspective, some of what I am aware of in terms of like what Colorado experienced is it was significantly difficult to determine whether or not people were claiming that it was industrial hemp because the way that that reg was set up, they would call into the ag department and say, I'm ready to harvest. The ag department would go out and do field sampling and determine that, yes, it was below the THC threshold for industrial hemp, but then they would leave the crops up for several more weeks, which then they would mature, and depending on which cultivar they were actually growing, it would then become in excess of the 0.3 THC threshold and become essentially what they refer to as hot hemp or non-compliant hemp. And so from a staff capacity perspective, in terms of, the ag department as it's currently structured, I think it would be, totally not accomplishable to actually verify in a reasonable time frame and ensure that these were not just illicit cannabis cultivation operations trying to find a loophole to not engage in the commercial cannabis regulated industry. So if that helps to give a little more information.
But that's the kind of thing over the next couple years, maybe you put a limitation on between the time frame between when it was tested and when it was harvested, so that you don't have that issue. I mean, I do think you can address some of those things.
Again, I think it comes down to a staff capacity issue.
Right,
And at that
and that's just it. Maybe you have a application fee that covers, the staff costs
It would have to
for
cover the cost.
inspection.
It would
Yeah,
have to cover the
right.
cost. And that might be prohibitive. If
true.
there's 1 or 2 hemp farms and they have to cover an employee to go down there and do that.
Right.
But in 2 years, there might be new technologies, and other communities may have hashed out a lot of these concerns, and we might have more known.
And potentially more applicants to make that cost share easier.
And opportunities for us to hear feedback. I'm continually, as commissioners, we're continually getting feedback from members of the public on how ordinances and overlays ought to be. And so I'm looking forward to hearing from the public about potential hemp projects and how they could propose to mitigate the challenges. So we have 2 years for that.
Well,
Or we
we'll see what
have
the Board of
we have the
Supervisors-
recommendation. Yeah. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to C then. Community development, planning, additional study session, Trinity County zoning code update, part 2.
Good evening, commissioners and public. So this is a continuation of several study sessions that we've had now on parts 2, 4, and 7. We had a number of hours at the last Planning Commission meeting to discuss the cannabis land use tables, the opt-outs, cannabis ordinances, et cetera. And the main takeaway from that was to bring back the cannabis land use tables with revisions. So attached in backup is zoning code tables, cannabis land uses revised 3/2026, where I went back through and verified that the inconsistencies that we found at the last meeting were resolved. I just want to point out that in terms of what, obviously we've gone through a process, a multi-year process of establishing the full scope of all of these cannabis ordinances. And for these various, what we refer to as additional license types, I think that there's certainly some inconsistency, primarily, let's say, in what is related to ag preserve versus ag forest. And then as far as some of the other additional license types, where they require a CUP in certain zoning districts versus a DUP in certain zoning districts, my reading of that is that the commission or the board at that point perhaps got them backwards. So anyways, I've gone back through and revised the tables, and I can, sort of run you through it if you want. I don't know if you have specific questions, happy to answer them. That's my introduction.
So We made changes to the tables in addition to the cannabis land uses that didn't get captured on this revised.
Agreed.
Okay, so how do we know that those got captured at some point?
We have them in our notes, and we're currently actively working with Mentor Harnish to go through the, I don't know, probably 40+ hours of Planning Commission meetings, where we've, have notes combined between Mentor Harnish staff and county staff. I guess I can cover it now, although I was going to do it in my report out. Essentially, we are planning to have this public review draft of the entirety of the updated zoning code released by April 17th. And then, again, I was going to detail some of this in my report out, but if it makes sense now, I can give you kind of the overall timelines.
Go for it.
So we're going to release the public review draft on the 17th of April. And on May 19th from 2 to 9, we will have a special meeting to review the public review draft of zoning code here in board chambers. Again, that's from 2 p.m. to 9 p.m. on May the 19th. And then again, the following day on May 20th from 9 to 5. Special study sessions here in board chambers to review the entirety of the public review draft of zoning code. And following that, those changes will all be documented, and yeah, that's kind of the general gist of the timeline that we're working towards at this point.
Will that be those two, the 19th and 20th? Will those be joint session
Yes,
meetings?
the commission is invited to attend as well.
Mhm. And so by the 17th of April, all the notes of the 40 hours of back and forth will be compiled, and then and it will be ready for public review, but not come back to us to make sure that our direction was thoughtfully given or thoroughly. I mean, there's a lot of, there's a lot of information.
Agreed. There's a lot of information. It will undoubtedly come back to the Planning Commission following those special study sessions. We are still working to determine the exact timeline of when that will come before the Planning Commission. So we'll keep you posted, and likely we'll have a good update related to that during those May study sessions.
So the only question, I did go through the cannabis land uses, versus what we had talked about, my notes and stuff. The only real question I have is under TPZ. So right now, under 1743-050A4, you cannot have cultivation in TPZ unless you're grandfathered. And that language is still in draft 1785. But on the tables, you're proposing either a director's use permit or a conditional use permit for TPZ. And is that asterisk meaning grandfathered? Is that what that means?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't update the legend on the side of the table, but yes, the asterisk indicates that, that provision of the limitations on location to cultivate and that grandfathering clause would apply.
So then what you've done is you've made the zoning table with that. By having the asterisk, you've made that consistent with 1785 and the current language in 1743?
Yes, that is intended to reflect the current language in the limitation section currently in 1743, which is being included into 1785.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
So there will be time to make more changes, as you're saying, after the two meetings?
Yes, undoubtedly, the recommendations that come out of the special study sessions in May will then, there will be formal direction to staff to make changes. Again, we're still working on the exact timeline when that will come before the Planning Commission, whether in the form of a revised public review draft or for the formal adoption hearings.
Okay, because I mean, I have a handful of changes I like to work on, but now is not the time, is what you're saying? Or are you guys willing to hear more discussion on a
I
few
mean, I
handful of
think-
things?
I think, yeah, I mean, if you have some particular,
Just a couple.
some particular changes or suggestions in the zoning, in the tables, I think now would be the time, because that's just gonna be compiled and be
more-
part of
more-
that discussion that goes to the Board of Supervisors.
Yeah.
Right now, we're discussing the cannabis land use.
Right.
And to my recollection, we went through all of them, and it was only the resource zones that were really, that were the challenge.
Right, we had ag preserve and ag forest flip-flopped, if I remember correctly. Yeah.
But other than that, we had gone through all of the rest of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so it's basically that's what we're discussing on the agenda, outside of other discussions that we may have.
So I just
Are
wanted
we
to
gonna,
clarify.
point of
on-
order, are we gonna have public comment before we get into discussions?
That's correct. So right now is clarifying questions. So, but those details will go after public comment. Any more questions for staff? Okay, we'll bring it to public comment. Is there any public comment on the study session? Well, I mean, really, I mean, we're discussing this, but we didn't allow you an opportunity to talk on, anything that was not on the agenda, and this land use is on the agenda. So I would say, yes, we do open it up for comments on this.
But if I
You
maybe
may.
question, so the agenda item is the zoning code tables. I had asked the chair, and he may clarify, to add the ability to discuss the cannabis ordinance 1785 that we never finished. And so I'm not sure if you want to break public comment up into zoning code tables versus cannabis ordinance potentially.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. So yeah, we did not finish that discussion on the cannabis ordinance. We got through most of it. And so we'd like to, when we're finished with this, if time is permitting, continue where we left off on clarifying the cannabis ordinance. And so at this point, we can talk about the land use tables with regards to the resource of cannabis. And then when we're finished with that, we will continue the cannabis discussion of the ordinance.
That help.
I don't know, did you bring your tablet? Can you share the table? Okay, sure. Yeah, so let's go ahead and go to the land use for cannabis resource.
So you would like me to share the tables while we allow for public comment?
Yeah, that's what they're going to be commenting on. So yes, please.
Okay, give me a sec to join the Zoom meeting.
Yeah. For ag or this is for the resource zoning. So this is ag preserve, ag forests, TPZ, open space, and TPZ. Right on. So we'll now open it up to public comment. Let's go ahead and bring it to the cannabis use portion. There we go. Is there any public comment in the room with regards to this particular table? Sure. Yeah, the last couple of meetings, we went through this table and found that there was a bunch of just mistakes in this, so many that we decided to continue this till this meeting. Any public comments?
Just a question on, for the egg forest zoning, why isn't a nursery potentially allowed there? But it is for egg and egg preserve. It would seem reasonable. I mean, egg forest allows for wood processing plants, which is a rather intense use. So a nursery, I don't think, would be out of the realm of possibility for egg forest zoning. And then I would just, continue with my concerns about so many use permits for all these allowable uses that perhaps some should be permissible by right. And then depending on the intensity, that's when you move into like a director's use, something very intense, then perhaps that's where the CUPs are applicable. But to have so many just Ds and Cs, got the Permit Streamlining Act, we're not going to be able to go around that anymore. So it's, that's just a concern.
Thank you. Yep, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair and Board and staff. This is Tommy Lohr. I'm a resident at Post Mountain. And as a group collectively decided that Ag 1, it's probably best to suit for our rural area up in Post Mountain because we're in a overlay zone. And I think that will suit our purpose as an agriculture farm up there. Because it says that Ag 1, the purpose is to protect, reserve, and encourage commercial agricultural production and related activities for 1 to 5 acres. That's what I read for California Code. So if that's what Trinity County is going according to that, then that will fit our criteria. That's what we need up there. Thank you.
Thank you, Tommy. Public comment in the room? If there's no more public comment in the room, we'll bring it to Zoom.
Have Matthew Jefferson.
Go ahead, Matt.
Hello, Chair, Commission, and staff. Matt Jefferson. First, I hope you can support what the gentleman just said, Tommy or whatever. Sounds like that'd be perfect for them. And then, am I speaking at the wrong time if I was to speak on agricultural and resource uses table?
You're right on point.
Okay. That one, there's a whole bunch of things that say section blank, and I don't remember exactly what it was about, but there was a bunch of comments that Dan Fraser made that don't seem to be reflected in these revised tables. And then if I wanted to make a comment on definitions, would this be okay?
No.
Okay. Then thank you, and I am done.
Thank you.
We also have Rhoda.
Hi, Rhoda.
Hi, Rhoda Kane, Coffee Creek, Trinity Center area. I'm sorry, I can't see the charts very well. I'm on my mobile and it's very, very tiny. I don't have my glasses, but I feel like, Dan Fraser knows what he's talking about and none of his changes seem to be reflected. But also, anywhere agriculture is allowed, we need to allow packaging, processing, farm stands, firewood, all of these things fit into rural Trinity County lifestyles. And
Hey, Rhoda,
all the
if I may stop you real quick.
Yes.
Right now, we're really, what is being brought up is the cannabis land use, acceptable land use in the zoning. the zone resource.
Okay.
If-
Yeah,
if I-
packaging, processing, farm stand, firewood, all, and then all the Ds and Cs we have a lot of, but all right, thanks.
If I may, that was why I asked my question earlier. So the only changes that were made were to the cannabis specific subsets of the tables. So yeah, I had a whole bunch of comments, like incorporating Dan's comments and all that. And so I agree with Rhoda. Those were not incorporated on these revisions, but that was not what we asked for. We just asked for the cannabis ones. And so the other revisions, like suggested by Mr. Fraser, those would be in the public review draft.
Yes.
So not up for discussion at the moment.
They're currently in the works to be revised,
Yeah.
and we have all the notes and.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I hope that helped.
Any more public comment on Zoom?
No more comments.
Okay, we'll close public comment and bring it back to the commission for discussion. So commission, can you refresh my memory on why ag preserve was not, ag forest was not allowing a nursery? I believe we discussed it.
Well, if you read the definition of ag forest, the purpose of ag forest zone is to identify and set development standards for land suitable for forestry management. So it's not horticulture. Ag talks about horticulture, but ag forest, it's like a precursor for TPZ. So that's why it was not included.
But yet at the same time, it allows for processing and non-store. It allows for all other facets of cannabis agriculture. Yeah. Do you have something to add?
I guess if it's helpful, I just stopped sharing for a second so I could scroll around, but I can show you the existing cannabis nursery code section as sort of the basis for what we then have converted over to directed use permits or conditional use permits. If that's helpful, that's also why you'll see in the tables when we go back to it, there's that one conditional use permit that's highlighted, and it's related to the existing provisions of agriculture. So let me reshare again. So as you'll see in 1743A 020, cannabis nurseries are allowed in ag preserve and agriculture, but not in ag forest. And I would agree with Commissioner Fall that I imagine the rationale for that being established the way it was originally is related to the primary intent for ag forest, which is not horticulture.
Mm-hmm. And why is the C in ag preserve highlighted?
The C in ag preserve is highlighted just as kind of a reminder that nursery is allowed in ag preserve as a conditional use permit, just kind of as a note to myself, if nothing else.
Okay, sweet.
So again, you have to go back and look at the definition of ag preserve. So it's at least 100 acres. It qualifies for inclusion under the California Land Conservation Act. It has to enter into a contract with the county. So, there's just different
And
definitions.
yeah, ag preserve and Williamson Act is something that we've actively been looking into to try and understand more clearly in terms of moving forward with that zoning district and understanding Williamson Act enrollments going forward. So I don't have a clear answer, but from my perspective, currently, I don't believe that huge horticultural nursery operations are really aligned with the intent of preserving agricultural lands via Williamson Act. And so that's where I think there is some potential conflict and rationale for not necessarily including, large scale commercial nurseries into ag preserve, but again, we're doing some work on that. So, more comprehensively and beyond cannabis. So again, that's kind of why it's highlighted as to whether or not it really is an appropriate use in the ag preserve zone.
Okay, thank you.
Seems like almost the opposite if you're trying to preserve ag.
Oh, it's really to preserve agricultural lands,
For
from,
agriculture. For agriculture.
from development.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so again, I don't have a firm conclusion for you, but something that we're definitely trying to understand more closely, for cannabis and beyond for ag preserve uses.
Aren't there like tax benefits for being signed up or with the Williamson Act?
Yeah, significant tax reductions.
Fellow commissioners, do you have any thoughts on these updates?
I don't know. I still lean towards not limiting anything. So I would agree to put at least a C on ag forest. I doubt that anybody's going to get zoned ag forest and then want to grow a nursery, but if they do, should at least be able to present their case.
And isn't ag forest like a transition zoning from TPZ to something else? Isn't that like the process from getting out of the contract with TPZ?
Ag forest is traditionally to move into TPZ.
To move into TPZ.
Yes, what kind of? It's like how agriculture lands can move, if they go under a Williamson Act, can then move into ag preserve. If a parcel is ag forest and they want to enter into a TPZ contract, then they can do that and be rezoned to TPZ. Now, with ag forest, it has lower acreage requirements than a TPZ. And TPZ also requires a timber harvest plan, whereas ag forest doesn't necessarily require one. And with ag forest, there's some cases where people still have to deal, like work with CAL FIRE and hire on a forester to manage the land and have a plan for the timber. So they're closely tied. And TPZ, it will just adjust how the assessor's office calculates the taxes for it. It doesn't give as big of a tax break as the Williamson Act. So it's a little really complicated, and the primary purpose of ag forest and TPZ is to protect forest land for the purpose of timber production for future industries.
True.
If I may, I think it could be fair to assume that we may have some parcels in the county that are currently or proposed to be zoned ag forest going forward that may not be 100% timberland. I think ideally, rather than, to Commissioner Harper's comment, rather than allowing for it on a conditional use permit basis, which could be very sensible, ideally we would do more robust evaluations of, the resources on those parcels and confirm that ag forest parcels are, primarily, perhaps not 100%, but, the vast majority of that parcel is actually timberland. But knowing that, that there could be the potential of, an area of a sizable parcel that is zoned ag forest that is not actually timberland.
Should be just ag.
Right, and it would, ideally, we would rezone it to ag. So I don't think it's totally unreasonable to propose a C go into ag forest for nursery. And then, those provisions of ag forest in terms of having a forester evaluate that the proposed development under that conditional use permit would not negatively impact future timber harvests, which is kind of already the standard in ag forest, could work.
Yeah, if you have 150 acres, but there's a 20-acre meadow at the bottom that's not timberlands, that could be used as a nursery. Yeah, I'm all right with it being a C. Fellow commissioners?
Not in a meadow, but okay.
Yeah, I mean, if you have the appropriate standards, then yeah, that would make sense. Like you say, I mean, you still have to look at whether or not it's going to interfere with the primary purpose of ag forest, which is to grow timber.
Yeah. So, and if I may, there's been a lot of discussions about just allowable uses, right? And land uses that are outside of cannabis. There's a lot of allowable uses, but then with regards to cannabis, there's no just allowable uses. So, is there a way to allow for zoning to have allowable uses, but yet at the same time have the rigorous regulatory framework to be able to ensure that it is in compliance?
It's a great question. From my understanding, essentially right now, in order to get a Department of Cannabis Control license, what they require from local jurisdictions, who are the lead agency, is some sort of CEQA determination. So not exactly sure from a process perspective, as the lead agency, how we would apply a CEQA determination to a project that is allowed by right. So that's, as far as us digging into it and trying to understand that potential, acknowledging the discussion that we've had over the last many meetings, that's kind of as far as we've been able to get currently, is that I'm not exactly sure how we would be able to provide the DCC the required environmental review if we were to allow these uses by right.
Yeah.
That's the best answer that I have at the moment.
Okay, right on. Fellow commissioners, is there any more discussion about direction to give to staff for this particular table? Okay, if not, then we can move on. And before we leave the tables, if there are any suggestions from fellow commissioners that we can, have some quick add-ons discussion for changes, now would be the time.
Okay. Let's see. So agritourism, I think should be allowable all the way across the board. I mean, whether it's ag forest or open space or TPZ, why wouldn't agritourism be available, whether it's for timber operations or?
Well, because agritourism has to be associated with a working farm.
It does have to be a farm?
Yeah, if you look at the definition, yeah.
Okay, then that one's fine. Next one is an apiary. Why can't you have bees on open space or TPZ or ag forest?
Well, you can have,
That's not going to negatively affect the timber production.
Nor the ability for animals to travel
well,
through open space.
but as Blights pointed out last time, we have issues with native bees, and I don't know that, you want to have an apiary and ag forest. You can have the up to 10 hives, you can have, if you're going to have more than 10 hives, you need to have or if you have hives that are not associated with pollinating like an orchard or something, that's an apiary, and that's when you need, the director's use permit or whatever. And so I just don't think that belongs in ag forest. Why would you have an apiary in the middle of a timber?
Maybe you like honey and you like logging at the same time.
I mean, it's
Well, but you need, but you can have 10 hives. That's a lot of honey.
Yeah.
I think it's a discussion of like density, how many apiaries to put in one area, not necessarily that they can't exist in those locations.
Yeah, and that seems like, the native pollinator discussion is something that is outside of our realm of understanding and would probably need some professional to help us understand that. But I mean, I buy plenty of wildflower honey.
What
and-
about open spaces? Could be a field of yellow star thistle, which makes great honey. So
It's not the definition of open space.
what is open space? Sorry.
You have to go back
May-
to the.
May I speak on open space?
Please.
Okay, open space isn't just, like, open space can be for protecting critical habitats, for, like deer migration, the wintering range for deer. But also, it is designated for areas that are unsuitable for building. And so like, floodplains, steep mountain ranges where you could not, it's like over 30% grade, you can't build a structure there because of physics. So there's different reasons why an open space may exist. And typically we avoid having any sort of like structures built within open space range areas.
Yeah.
And
So-
that's why it would be like for low intensity recreation for like hiking, trails, but not, or in other areas, some parks are designated as open spaces. But for the majority of Trinity County outside of our semi-urban clusters, it's either critical habitat or it's unsuitable for building.
And in other districts, other places throughout the United States, they're using their open space zoning to help actually restrict development to protect the resources they do have, their water limitations, trying to prevent future development as well. So we have it defined as to protect significant and critical wildlife habitat areas or areas which should not be developed due to public safety and safety reasons. But in other areas, these areas are being kept open so that we can maintain the beauty. We have a lot of areas of beauty and not a lot of development. So we're in the inverse of that concern. But it is something to keep in mind, you know, if you have a park space and somebody wants to buy it and convert it to something else, that's when you want to implement that open space and say, no, we want to keep that open. So.
Yeah, we have lots of open space out Sky Ranch Road in Junction City, and it is, I think it was because it's in the floodplain and not able to be developed, and it's tailings with star thistle, right? There has been challenges for cannabis farmers whose land is open space, and so they're not able to have their farm on there because there's the impact of cultivation and fencing and such like that. But I don't know. I mean, it seems like apiaries, like if, to diversify, it's you have 500 acres that you harvest with your timber once a generation, but then you also are able to have bees as well. Or with the open space, at least, if it's land that's too steep, bees don't care about how steep it is. That might be something that could be utilized. Or in the floodplains, and these are not floodplains that are like annual floodplains. These are like 100-year floodplains that you can't build in. That might be very appropriate to have an apiary because there's nothing else that can be there.
So I would seriously disagree.
Okay.
If it is zoned open space, not just what you think of randomly as.
I'm talking
oh,
about zone open
okay.
space in Junction City.
All right, so if you read the definition, you're supposed to be protecting critical wildlife habitat areas and areas should not be developed due to public health and safety reasons. And so
Right.
I just don't think you want to have somebody spending a lot of money.
We can
Putting
drop,
in an
we can
apiary.
drop the apiary, it's fine. I just don't see why we're restricting it is worthwhile. It just seems. Okay, next one is public schools. Drew, did that get, I believe Dan Fraser brought that up. Is that
So again, to the comments that Commissioner Fall has made, we did not make any revisions
Okay.
based on the comments received to anything other than the cannabis portion of these zoning tables for
Okay.
tonight's
So
study.
I just want to reiterate about the public school and the fact that homeschooling is part of that, and where you have to get a conditional use or a use permit to be able to homeschool seems wrong. So something needs changed in the definition, I believe.
Agreed.
Okay. Sawmill on ag preserve, ag forest, and TPZ. There should be a second sawmill, like one industrial and one just sawmill, because you can't. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. You're just disallowing it on ag and ag preserve. So is that only industrial sawmill? Is there's in the description, there's no differentiation, it doesn't say. So if you had an sawmill or an industrial sawmill,
Would
Well, I
it
think-
not fit into home occupation or home enterprise?
I think you need to go back to see what the definition of sawmill is. And so sawmill, a facility where felled logs are cut into lumber, often with heavy machinery.
okay,
So-
that's my sawmill at home,
So you're right then. If you go back to the definition.
right? There needs to be either two of them,
Yeah,
because you can't just disallow someone to cut and mill their own wood.
Or,
Right.
you know,
You used to use loader to put the log in, so.
that's very different. Yeah.
It does say it did say, and I'll verify that it's still in the current draft later, but the home occupation and home enterprise did include portable sawmill, chipper, and similar equipment.
Okay, so then you're already covered. Don't need to add
Okay.
this second definition.
So the sawmill in that description on here would only be industrial.
Well, so currently it
Partial.
says portable. So as long as the sawmill is portable, it qualifies for home occupation and home enterprise. Once we get out of portable, then it no longer qualifies. So if we need to add some additional language there to allow the small scale sawmills that are not portable, then let's make sure to do that.
Mine is bolted to concrete. And it's a small home sawmill that I mill wood with for my own use.
Is there a threshold that you would recommend? Commissioner?
I would just put a commercial or I don't know how you do that.
I think that's the question from my perspective, right? Is there a,
Two definitions.
a width of cut, from a sawmill, a blade size, size of log, something else that we could differentiate?
Volume.
Right, volume of production, something else that we could differentiate, between just portable and non-portable, to your
Well,
point.
yeah, I mean, you could look at the
Oh,
capacity.
just allow a sawmill across all the TPZ and ag preserve and ag, just allow a
Mm,
sawmill.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
There's differentiation between commercial and personal, and I think that should be made because for personal, that should be allowed. But once we get into the commercial realm, that gets a little hairier.
Right. We don't want TRL moving in, but
talking about a portable sawmill or equivalent capacity, So yeah, you took your Alaska mill or your wood miser and you bolted it to the ground, so it's no longer portable, but it's still got a certain capacity.
Right, I mean, I think, Dan, you might know more about that than anyone else here in the room, potentially. So is there a log size threshold, it can only accommodate logs up to X diameter or something like that, that kind of then creates that threshold of like, hey, the average, home size or
so
light
I can mill
industrial
bigger,
land,
I can mill bigger logs than Schmidt-Bauer can in Eureka.
So is there additional equipment that an industrial size facility would need that you don't have?
Yeah, an 80,000 pound loader, I guess.
or some, like board feet maximum per year or something like that. I don't know.
Volume of production?
Or commercial sales.
I mean, commercial
know.
sales aren't even,
But even that, I mean, you want to be able to sell wood
Yeah,
possibly if
it's a
that's.
home enterprise, you want to have
Right.
some commercial element.
Mhm. Okay. Well, what shall we do?
Work on that.
Staff?
Input during public review comment.
Yeah.
All right.
I believe that's all I have.
So it's under commercial uses. So there's like animal hospital, brewery, contractor yard, get down to the bottom, there's sawmills, slaughterhouse. And yeah, so sawmill right now, as Dan was pointing out, Commissioner Harper, is not allowed in agriculture or ag preserve. But it is allowed under home enterprise if it's portable.
So I think just add it to ag and ag reserve would be my
Well,
solution.
yeah.
Well, I think it's the differentiation between the scale, right? And so maybe it is a annual quota or something like that, that if you're underneath that, then you're fitting within home enterprise. And if you're above that, you're outside.
Yeah, you could put it at 1,000,000 feet because no commercial sawmill is going to mill less than that. I mean, that's
About a number of
like a
employees.
4-hour shift over here.
Number of employees.
There you go.
There you go.
Maybe 2 employees max or something. That's all you really need to do a home enterprise.
2 employees max is a distinguishing factor.
I think so.
Fellow commissioners?
I really only need one person to help. If I have someone pulling chain, it
Right,
makes
but
a
what
big
if you
difference.
have a couple that are part-time? So, you know, you could say equivalent, like 2 full-time equivalents. I don't want us to cap it at 2 individual people. That gets
Yeah.
difficult to
That could be a
manage.
Full-time equivalents. Okay. I think that's good direction for staff. Okay, well, fellow commissioners, do you have any more input on those? And since we allowed for the commissioners to, I'm going to open it up to public comment. And if the public has any suggestions on the tables as well, now is your time.
Other than what we already,
Other than the cannabis
well, I mean,
resource.
so Dan was adding things that we had not previously discussed. So I still have the list of all the things we previously discussed that didn't get incorporated. So we're not going to revisit all those, right? Okay.
No, because I believe what Drew said, they're in the queue waiting to be.
Yeah.
This was an addition. You
This
had
is
stuff that was
an
in addition to
what we talked
There's
about.
a handful of people here. I don't believe it would take too long. And if they have some additions to add that we could consider, then we can. Is there any public comment on those tables?
I was lost for a minute on the sawmills, but I saw it was below cannabis.
Mhm.
So those haven't been updated to your suggestions, though. So I'm just wondering why there's all these uses like mining, sawmill, campgrounds, recreational areas, et cetera, in open space after the discussion you had about aviaries not being appropriate in open space. Why would mining, you know what I mean? Why are those other activities okay?
Thank you. Any more public comment in the room?
Maybe. Tom Blanco, Douglas City. Is this appropriate to comment on what you're discussing on sawmills, or is this after? Is this non-cannabis resource land?
Yeah, this is the zones. We open it up for the planning commission to discuss some, any more last additions to the tables before we don't discuss the tables anymore for this meeting.
Gotcha. So yes, Tom Blanco, Douglas City. I do want to echo some of what Commissioner Harper was saying about sawmills and personal size, which, you know, in a great day, maybe we can do 1,000,000 board feet in a year. I don't think anybody with a personal mill can, but who knows? Maybe there's a fire that, you know, I never expected to be milling wood on my property 10 years ago. And then beetles came and delivered 200 Doug fir that are 3 feet wide. So all of a sudden I'm milling timber. I'm not sure we want to restrict anybody anywhere in Trinity County that wants to open an industrial sawmill, but that's for your esteemed knowledge to do. But definitely, I think we want to encourage particularly small mills. I think it's healthy for our forests, it's healthy for our fire suppression, and it's good for building. Support it wherever we can have it. And then I did just want to comment a little on this. We're talking about uses of right. I will mention the word cannabis. I'm not trying to go back. But when something is a use of right, it doesn't mean it still doesn't need a license. Cultivation is a use of right today on rural residential. It means you don't need a conditional use permit or a DUP to do it on rural residential, but you still need a license. So it still gets that secret review. So we could do things, any uses, aviary, anything, use of right, but that can still have other requirements for it, making it a project, making it subject to CEQA. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more public comment in the room? If not, we'll go to Zoom.
We have Rhoda.
Hey, Rhoda.
Hi, Rhoda Kane, Trinity Center, Coffee Creek area. I think that an apiary on open space land, that can only encourage the development of and the success of native flora in the area. So I think an apiary is kind of you're not building anything, you're putting some things out there. Also, I agree with Tom Blanco and the sawmills that, we are in extreme fire danger out here, that any time anybody wants to, we really need to encourage the ability of people to be able to take down bad trees anytime, do anything they want with their trees, cut their, fire line, do all of that. I am just, and I'm admittedly know absolutely nothing about sawmills, but is there perhaps like a weight that comes with sawmills or a size that comes with sawmills that maybe that could be a way to limit it? Is like, is an industrial sawmill at, say, Trinity Lumber significantly larger than a home sawmill? I don't know. Dan might know the answers to those questions, but yeah, I think that's kind of all I have.
Thank you, Rhoda.
We also have Matthew Jefferson.
Before it, Matt.
Hello, commission and staff. Is this our last opportunity to comment on any of the zoning tables, as in residential?
Yeah. For this particular study session.
So I just want to talk to the cannabis land uses in the residential zoning districts. I have other things to say on agriculture and resource uses, but I feel like what I'm hearing is Drew was not able to get to that yet. Totally understand. I just really hope that, I want to bring up the point that a vast majority of our cannabis cultivators are on RR. And I have a big fear and worry that I believe there's 4 cultivation facilities in the opt-out zones. And we're going to have our own restrictions on our own uses. And I feel like the RR table is getting muddled or getting not talked about because we're worried about what the cultivators in the opt-out zones are going to do. And it's still not reflecting any of the changes that I would hope should be reflected, because you're saying micro business is allowed in RR, but you're not giving any of the cultivators enough allowable uses to be able to obtain a micro business. And I just really hope that the farmers in the opt-out zone, being me, is not slowing that process down. We need to make sure all the other people outside of the opt-out zones are able to get micro business when they're on RR and all these allowable areas. But thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Is there any more public comment?
Yes, we also have John Brower.
Hey, John. You there, John?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
Thanks. Yeah.
Nope, you're not. You're not very clear, John.
Being whole, but
John, you might want to move
how's
to
this any better?
that's all right. Try again. Nope.
Right. Yeah. With micro businesses and the allowable
John, we can't
uses
hear
to
you.
be a micro business.
Yeah.
How about now? Hello.
Yep.
Hello.
There it is. You're clear.
All right. Thanks. I agree with Matt Jefferson about the allowable uses for micro business must be allowed on RR also, even if in a low impact fashion. And touching on a few other things, the open space is used in many other places in California as agricultural open space and allows for all agricultural uses. You just can't take that land out of agriculture, and it continues to be
John, we're really only hearing a little bit of what you're saying. Okay, we're going to move on from John Brower to the next public comment.
We have Pesha.
Pesha,
Yes.
are you there?
Yep, I'm here. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I would like to make a comment on the residential zoning under the RR. Is that okay for me to make a comment on that?
It is appropriate, but I would like to add that we had discussed rural residential extensively, and the tables that are there do not reflect our discussion. And so there is some confusion, especially if you were not at the last meetings. And so
this table
I
was
see a
not reflect
challenge
to
there.
the discussion that you guys have last meeting.
It was in a prior meeting that we discussed rural residential in quite a lot of detail.
Okay. Well, because when I looked at this, I'm a little bit concerned. I wasn't here in the last meeting, and I was a little bit concerned because we are changing some of our District 4 and District 5 to our zoning. And looking at the cultivation mediums is a dash, and looking at the distributions a dash, and going to nursery. I like the board to reconsider and for future expansions because this is kept at the residential use. So considering the
Hey, Pesha, if I may stop you real quick, I would recommend that you keep an eye out for the public review draft that's coming out, because it will reflect the changes that the commission has suggested. And
so right now we're just
this has
talking
been
about
talked about extensively.
So right now we're just talking about
It's any additional
natural resource, right?
It's any
The
additional
resource only?
changes, and so
Okay.
which makes it challenging for people who have not been through this whole entire process. But any additional changes that would like to be discussed, that would like to be put in.
Chair,
Yes.
let me just clarify that all of the cannabis land uses, based on my understanding from the last PC meeting, have been updated to reflect the direction from the prior meetings and planning commission.
Has it?
Yes.
Right.
And there are a few, if I may respond to some of the public comment that's just come in,
Yes.
like related to micro business. If you look at RR10 and RR, micro business is allowed. There is, and we discussed this at the last meeting, that the standalone uses are not allowed in RR and RR10, but if you actually read the body of zoning code, we are allowing for micro business activities in RR in conjunction with a cultivation license and with the ability to, at a lower threshold than a full-blown distribution facility, we are facilitating the ability for folks in RR and RR10 zones to engage in micro business, just not the standalone uses. So that is a significant change from the current configuration of zoning code, where the provisions of those additional license types said that for micro business, you had to meet the standards of the standalone uses. So I just want to clarify that. And then to some of the comments that Pesha just made, as far as why cultivation medium is not allowed in RR, as it's currently proposed, you need a 50-acre parcel minimum to engage in medium cultivation, which RR is a 10-acre or less parcel size. That is why you see a dash there. And that is why you see it as a conditional use permit potentially, for RR10, because those parcels, again, if where we land is where we've been, as far as 50 acres or greater to engage in medium, then they would be allowed on an RR zone parcel that was 50 acres or greater.
And I'd also like to point out, nursery, we've never allowed in residential. It's always been ag, commercial, or industrial. So
That's
How
not true.
about distributions?
it is.
That's not correct. If you go, I recall from the last one, if you go up to the next table
I'm,
up,
I'm just saying in 1743
it allows
and in
for
1785,
nurseries and greenhouse and plant production
that's new.
is a permissible use.
That's new.
I believe we've changed.
So I think where we're getting lost there is the
that.
difference between a cannabis nursery and a non-cannabis nursery.
Yeah. We also gave direction
So,
for
yeah, I mean, you've-
non-storefront retail on RR10 and
You-
RR.
If it's associated with a micro business, you can have non-storefront retail.
That was not my recollection of our discussion. But
Point of order, we're still in public comment.
yeah, thank you. Pesha, I am so sorry that we've
Okay.
kind of taken this from you, but you can proceed in your public comment. Again, I apologize.
Okay, well, because coming from the residential, the citizens' standpoints, we do not want this to be kept in, so it's restricted for potential expansions and like distributions under the RR and like a processing facility. So for in the future, if I bought a land, two parcel adjacent to each other in Post Mountain, and I want to turn into an like a I don't know, like a processing facility or a nursery, would that restricted me? Because according to this table, it looks like restrictions.
May I
Go ahead.
respond? That's
Sure,
helpful, even though we're still in public comment,
Yeah,
just
sure.
to kind of clarify any additional public comment.
Sure.
So my recollection of where we landed, which is not reflected in these tables, is that we would align these uses to home occupation and home enterprise and revise these tables accordingly, which we did not have sufficient time to do that analysis and align those, but noted it will happen if that
There you go.
helps. Yes.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you, Pesha.
This is John again. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, you can give John one more minute.
Thanks. So the open space is used as agricultural open space throughout California. And it seems like agricultural uses should be allowable on open space as long as you don't build permanent structures on it or ruin the view or take it out of a natural type setting, especially in floodplains and old tailing piles. As far as Tom Blanco's comment about the issue of discretionary use and environmental review being necessary for state cannabis licenses, I think we could, while we are moving most of it to director's use and conditional use, which is discretionary, I think it does make sense to have some areas of the county available as a by right use, especially if they're small in nature, like we've always had, especially in places like Post Mountain.
Thank you, John.
No more comments.
Okay, go ahead and close public comments. Any more discussion before we close out this section?
I have a question for an alternative mechanism for the sawmills. Does your sawmill or many that are for private use cut on multiple planes at a time, or could we put a single plane limit to it?
Mine cuts on 2 planes at once.
Okay. Sorry. I was just trying.
I think the employee is probably your best, simplest route to do that, or do like 1,000,000 feet, because no private sawmill, even with 2 employees, is gonna hit that. It would take a, and no big commercial sawmill is gonna want to do with 1,000,000 feet or less, so. I think either 1,000,000 feet or 2 or 3 employees would be sufficient to kind of differentiate that and have 2 different sawmill categories.
Okay. Sounds good.
And we do have existing employee thresholds in home occupation and home enterprise, so I think that can align, and perhaps all we need to do is, revise the statement of portable. So we'll dig into it, and I think we understand what the direction there is.
Thank you.
Perfect, thank you.
To one of the earlier comments, though, I do think we should revisit it. So it was the discussion about Post Mountain and their concern about RR versus ag. So the 2050 general land use currently has them proposed to stay in RR. And so I think if we want to discuss how that's going to move forward, we might need to bring that back at a future meeting, unless we want to talk about it a little bit tonight because it was brought up in public comment. But I just want to bring that to our attention, that they're asking for agriculture, but they're currently in the land use zoned for rural residential. So then it's not an option. They would need to get changed to resource in order to be zoned as ag.
So they can currently have a small cannabis license on RR, yes? But they still have to meet the buffer requirements, and so a lot of the lots are 1 acre or a little bit smaller, so it's more have to get the administrative buffer through and all that kind of stuff to have a small license?
I mean, primarily, I'll make a generalization. The cultivator to cultivator exception applies to, many areas of Post Mountain. I don't believe that we created any restriction as it relates to the new proposed regs for stacking for RR, with the exception of the total lot coverage standard, which I took from medium of, I believe, 2%. So I'm not doing quick math in my head at the moment, unfortunately, but I think that for a 3-acre parcel, that would be 135,000 square feet. So there would be some ability, at somewhere in that like 2 to 5 acre parcel size range to go up slightly, perhaps beyond the existing 10,000 square foot limitation. To Commissioner Flight's comments, this is something that we've talked about quite a bit in the past, and in terms of going to an ag zone, currently under resource general plan designations and under that ag zoning, it's a 10-acre parcel size limit, which is why the majority of those parcels, even though we did talk about last year potentially converting to ag, that was, I think, ultimately the place where that didn't make good sense to move those small parcels into ag zoning.
So are we able to provide them with their request, which was clarification on communication as to what they're going to be zoned as, please?
And if I may add to that, there was for about a year, there was understanding that all licensed cannabis properties were going to have to be rezoned to agriculture. And that changed about 6 months ago with the recognition that cannabis is agriculture and it is allowed anywhere that agricultural is allowed. My thought is that communication moves slowly, and there was a momentum across the entire county that every licensed farm was going to have to rezone. And so there was an acceptance and then a recognition of the opportunity that comes with. And then that was, that discussion was taken off the table. And so I see where there is confusion if you're not keeping up with all the nuances of what's happening.
And I think there's also been, and probably continues to be, some lack of clarity in terms of the difference between a general plan designation and a zoning district. And so I know that, in that year ago plus timeframe, there was a lot of misuse of the terminology where folks were referring to redesignating the general plan designation and, misreferencing that as a rezone. So I think that's also part of the confusion, but agreed that following the general plan study sessions where we clarified that cannabis is agriculture, that's kind of as, we started to migrate away from.
So a couple of the commenters said that they were in an overlay zone. There's no overlay for Post Mountain, is there?
No, there is not currently proposed. I think that circles us back around to when we had community plan workshops and those engagements, that there was the concept that was floated out there. If there were, specific provisions that arised from the discussion with those communities, that there was the potential that community plan-based overlay zones be applied, which has not come to fruition. So
Okay.
that's my understanding of it.
Okay.
Dan?
Is there a reason why they didn't come to fruition? Is it from what side? I mean, why isn't there an overlay zone if that's what they wanted?
The reason why we didn't go with the overlay zones for specific community plans is because we were hearing a lot of the very similar concepts. And because we were seeing a lot of similar concepts, that told us it needed to be applied at the county level, not at individual communities. Because there's a lot of desire for more recreation options, more ag tourism. Cannabis was seen as ag, so there was the determination or the thought that cannabis should be treated uniformly throughout the county where applicable, instead of doing the overlay zones.
So what about an opt-in zone? I mean, if you have an opt-out zone, couldn't you have an opt-in zone?
Well, with the opt-out zone, that makes it where everything else is automatically like a
Opt-in?
opt-in
Okay.
in a sense.
I see in places like Post Mountain that are all small parcels of rural residential, but they are a predominant, there is a particular industry that permeates there. Because of the zoning, it does not allow for there to be a processing facility, which could benefit that community, or a nursery, because those are prohibited in RR outside of the micro business. So that's a discussion for the future to have.
Exactly.
Okay, let's go ahead and at the suggestion of Commissioner Fall, the recognition that we did not finish in our long day. We didn't go through the entirety of the cannabis ordinance. And so, Commissioner Fall, do you recall which page that we stopped on?
I think it was page 22.
22?
And I'm not sure if you want to have public comment or at what point as we go. We were good doing public comment section by section. I don't know.
Let's go ahead and have some public comments at the beginning of this, after there is maybe some clarifying questions for staff, and then we'll just go through and really just try to, it's 8 o'clock, go through the rest of this as efficiently as possible. And so, I mean, I guess there is going to be throughout there's clarifying questions for staff. So I think I'd just like to open this up. I would like to open this up for a public comment for the remainder of this cannabis ordinance, and then we'll bring it back for our discussions and directions.
Hello, Michelle Taylor, Coffee Creek. I have to put my glasses on. I can't see anything. I'm really glad that you're going to go through the rest of the cannabis ordinance. There's a lot of details. And I think that, you need to get input from the public before you move on. I, again, would like the cannabis director or the consultants to explain why the original opt-out areas were not included in the overlay zone draft. And if it was an oversight, I'd like the overlay draft to include the original opt-outs. And I don't know if that's being done or not. I would also like to have the cannabis ordinance include a process to amend the exclusion overlay opt-out areas, either creating new opt-outs or removing existing ones. And there was a section in the 223 cannabis draft that included that, and I'm wondering why it's not included this time. As for findings regarding Trinity Center and Coffee Creek opt-out areas, I'd like to let you know that one finding is many property owners in North Lake do not want further expansion of cannabis cultivation. And there are many pocket neighborhoods in Coffee Creek and Trinity Center. They could have 4 to 5 houses, but all together in proximity. So I don't know what the definition of high density is, but on my street, I can see all those houses. We're all kind of together as a neighborhood within a quarter of a mile. Although the loop is like 2 miles, we're all together. So it is dense in my perspective. And I also want to say that in Coffee Creek and Trinity Center, there are narrow roads, there's steep terrain, there's concern about water use. So that's all I wanted to say. Another thing, one more thing. Many people signed the petition, and a lot of them are elderly, and they can't come here at night and drive. They don't do Zoom. They have flip phones. They don't even have iPads. So I think having a petition was their voice. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Holly Anderson from Coffee Creek Trinity Center area. And I just wanted to make a comment reading this in the paper about the cannabis opt-out overlay that was mentioned. And I think last meeting, you had mentioned the population density overlay, and that's what I wanted to talk about. I'm not so worried about the Coffee Creek community proper, or the, that neighborhood, or the Trinity Center proper neighborhood, but the outlier neighborhoods. I am like Ripple Creek and Eagle Creek Ranch, that area, and I know there's a problem there and stuff. But I don't want to, you to forget that I was talking to Michelle, and she says like there's 6 months that are very full. And at that time, there's 30 to 40 people a week in those cabins. And I just took 35 as an average times 24, and it was 840 people that are potentially affected by that. We'll talk about, you talk about pollen drift and something else. I'm talking about the odor of a large grow. And the odor of that particular grow, when it was growing at Eagle Creek Ranch with the Feeling Groovy people, actually traveled 7.4 miles to Sunflower Flat. And we heard about it from those people. I live in Coffee Creek proper and had illegal grows next to me, or non-permitted ones, for years. And I can talk about that, but not now. But I don't want you to forget the amount of people that go through that area. Although they are not permanent residents, they have been coming for years, sometimes 3 and 4 generations of families that are visiting that very area. when I worked at the post office, that was one thing that people did come and say, Holly, is this going to be like this all the time? And, I didn't know what to tell them, but please don't forget those outlier areas, even like Trinity Alps Resort, that's still in that fire district. They have thousands of people coming through every single year. Thank you.
Thank you. More public comment?
Good evening again, Adrian Keys here. Not too much to add tonight, but as far as high density goes, I don't know for certain. I mean, I was actually at the meetings when this was decided, but high density is a zone. And so generally, I think we've gone through this before, where when you have a definition on the books, it's the one you tend to use. So I would have assumed the high density meant the zone. I think everybody agrees there needs to be a revision process, whether it's opt-in or out. And certainly there needs to be a review to qualify the parcels and the maps based on the findings. When you are looking at a map, and that's another question, I suppose, I was anticipating seeing maps possibly with the zoning and maybe little lines for setbacks and stuff like that, so you could actually see which parcels were being impacted and which ones weren't, or which ones have the possibility of even being impacted. I've done my own reading on that, and it seems that those closer in areas are already pretty well insulated, especially when you take into account that they'll never get a variance there any longer. So it's 350 feet from there, an additional 350 feet plus the zoning restrictions. But that needs to be included for a revision process to happen. We need to be able to see it. And that's something that we didn't have, particularly on that first opt-out. And considering the environmental findings, again, I'll just repeat it. If the roads are too narrow for a cannabis business with whatever activities are presumed behind that, and we're talking like maybe a 500 square foot indoor, who knows? They're certainly too narrow for many, many other activities. If there's not enough water for a 10,000 or a 2,500 square foot cannabis farm, a 500 square foot indoor farm, probably isn't enough water for a whole nother pile of other activities. And I feel really poorly for those people because they probably don't have enough water to even have a house. So I would have to assume that if we come to the point where we're actually quantifying environmental findings, which I believe we're going to have to do, that they're going to also apply to all these other things. So I think it's really important for parity and for honesty, intellectual honesty, that just is completely on the table. And there's in the comments, there's a lot of stuff about like cannabis greenhouses. Well, only cannabis greenhouses or all greenhouses would be prohibited? Do they want to, is there a desire to have a greenhouse overlay in the North Lake also, or is that just thrown in for rhetoric? It's hard to tell sometimes. So I'd just like to see as much of that get stripped out, get down to the facts. Not opposed to if there's some sort of middle ground that can be met. I think that's fine. But also, as far as the findings go, each activity will have different impacts. Certainly, there's no need to consider water for a delivery, retail delivery. So each license type will ultimately need their own findings, and that I believe is going to be quite a piece of work. So thank you.
Thank you, Adrian. Any more public comment in the room?
Not much, Lisa Wright Lewiston, because I've been through a lot of this already. One of the things I did notice is in the change for the 1 acre allowable to 30 now, bumping that up to 30, is there's still going to be some kind of qualifying factors outside of the minimum acreage. It appears that we're adding in, and I don't remember that discussion, maybe you haven't discussed it yet, and that is the number of years you've been in the program rather than, but priority still being given to 2016, 17 license holders. So I don't know if that means if they didn't have, I just understand, I guess, that difference. It used to be 2016, 17 priority. I personally don't think that you should try to rank them, but perhaps it's more appropriate for I don't think there's going to be a big rush, let's just say, but I do know people who maybe they had a farm in the past in one location and now they have a bigger acreage available at a new location and they had a gap in their licensing. Well, are they affected by this criteria selection of number of years or 2016, 17? Is it a different farm? It just gets kind of complicated then. And, you know, I own Flora and we are seeing an increasingly large volume of interest in Trinity County in cannabis properties right now, transfers, new purchases, and now in the past couple weeks, several have come to me looking at the potential for our acreage because as the value of cannabis has gone down, it's more about the volume, right? Being able to get the volume up. Mr. Lee spoke to that earlier. So maybe just some clarification around those qualifying factors. Up to 30, excellent. We just need to make sure the CUP process follows permit streamlining and meets the timelines and timetable. And I think we can get some people through that could actually be really successful. Just since I have a couple minutes to touch on the RR confusion about in Post Mountain. So I probably have 100 clients in Post Mountain. We have a large backlog right now of applications pending, and primarily in the Post Mountain area. There's a confusion because of what you were talking about with, at one time, staff had directed the consultants no cannabis and RR, right? That all came to kind of a kumbaya last June, where they said, no, we didn't direct that, the Planning Commission or the board, and we want this to be agriculture. So that moved forward. But there was discussions at the community plan level about that early on, switching everybody to ag. So confusion ensued, right, from this group. So they're very fearful that RR is not going to allow them to get licensed for cannabis. And there's also a distrust because of past issues, with government that, is that really going to be true? So just, I work with that community a lot. So.
Thank you. Public comment in the room? Okay, we'll move it over to Zoom for public comment.
We have Rhoda.
Go ahead, Rhoda.
Hi, Rhoda King, Trinity Center, Coffee Creek area. I'd just like to start with, I believe the general plan is for the residents of Trinity County, that the purpose of the general plan is so the residents of Trinity County can get what they want their community to look like. And that maybe we should carry a little bit more weight than tourists. Also, I'd like to comment about the 7 mile smell drift or whatever. I don't know. I'm not a scientist or whatever, but I do know that there are lots of farms up here, and to say that there's no cannabis grows are all over the place. When I came to buy my property, I got on Google Earth and I made sure this is cannabis country before I bought my property. And so I am not going to say it's false, but I also would imagine that it's likely that there are more cannabis grows closer to Sunflower Flats than the ones 7 miles away. I just think it's important in moving forward in anything that has to do with the general plan, zoning, anything like that, that it's important because it's the law that we don't use discrimination or personal feelings to make regulations, laws, zoning code in our county, that instead we use science and fact-based findings because that's what's required by state law. And as far as the opt-outs in Northlake, the only reason anybody has asked for those opt-outs to be removed is because the spirit of the grandfather clause has been repeatedly ignored and violated and whittled away until there's virtually nothing left of it. So at the very least, very least, the grandfather clause could be honored in the spirit that it was written instead of picked apart. And weed's always been here. If the tourists are like, oh, now that it's legal, now we can smell it. Well, it was always here. They just didn't know because nobody called them and told them. So there's that. I just am hoping that we can stop using discrimination and personal bias and start using science-based facts and findings. Thank you.
Thank you, Rhoda.
We also have Matthew Jefferson.
Hello, Commission and staff. Matthew Jefferson, Coffee Creek, Trinity Center. I'm going to address your attention to California Business and Profession Code 26060.1. Cannabis cultivation is legally defined as agriculture under California state law. Many California counties, including the rural county of Trinity, have the right to farm ordinance designed to protect agricultural activities from local restrictions and nuisance claims. These ordinances exist because agriculture is considered vital to rural economies. Cannabis is agriculture under state law. The North Lake opt-out zones hit arbitrary and capricious land use decisions. They violate Government Code 65860. They have illegal spot zoning. They violate the Equal Protection Act for similarly situated landowners in other areas. There's a pile of things that I have stated. In the last staff report, it was stated that the opt-out zones were come to as a quotation political compromise. That is an opinion. The quote word political compromise is actually specifically stated in California Land Use Code as something not allowed to use to create a land use exemption area. The only other finding presented is about density. We have had no density calculation presented. I really hope that we can stand with the residents and the working class of these communities to allow them to continue to support their families the way that they have multi-generationally. As we're going through the entire cannabis ordinance in section G, 1, it states, quote, if possible, Trinity County will, quote, attempt to give 24-hour notice for inspections. This, I believe, is just like highly inappropriate. Like, you can send an email, you can call somebody. To put in there that it says if possible and to attempt, like, it should say they have to send us an email. It doesn't mean anybody has to respond, but they need to notify to us. I don't know, there's so much to speak on. And I feel like this entire cannabis ordinance is like being controlled by a couple farmers in the opt-out zone. And I'm that farmer, and like everybody is being held up in this county because there's a little small argument about our farm, and let that be its own topic and let the rest of these farmers move forward and let them succeed. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt.
No more comment.
Okay, we'll go ahead and close public comment and move to page 20.
Chair, can I request a 5-minute recess?
Certainly. Yep, we will be back at 8:27.
Get a box for all of us?
Okay, we're back for this Planning Commission meeting. We're going back to continue to go over the cannabis ordinance that we did not finish going through. And we'll go to page 20.
Chair,
22. I know there's 21 we did not discuss, and it was brought up. Yes, Drew?
is the desire to go through line by line, or do the commissioners have specific sections that they would like to dig into?
Yeah, I went through, this was a good month ago, and I read through the ordinance, and I made notes along the way of points of clarity and providing some input, and I bet our fellow commissioners did the same.
Perfect. Did you want me to share the screen, or?
Sure, and I think we can just go down, each page, and if I have, we're not gonna be just going line by line, but if I have, a comment on 23, a comment on 25, and we can just go through like that. So we could start at page 21. And so it was also brought up by a community member about the possible Trinity County will attempt to give 24-hour notice for inspection. And so is that across the board with all different types of businesses that there will be an attempt, or can we just clarify that we will give a 24-hour notice even if it's in the form of an email?
Although that's what code says, in practice over the last several years, there are no sort of regular compliance site inspections that are done without advance notice. Typically, we're scheduling them a week out. So while it might say we will attempt, firmly, we do notify individuals just from if nothing else, from an efficiency standpoint, where we don't want to send staff out on perhaps a multi-hour or 6-hour round trip only to arrive at a locked gate. That being said, from what I've gathered, DCC is doing inspections without any advance notice currently. But I think they're also, from what I've heard, they're also aware of the potential inefficiencies that are created by trying to drive way out into rural Trinity County without advance notice. So we firmly do give advance notice. If the commission would like to see that section revised, happy to take that note down.
I think I would like to propose direction that says that we will give 24-hour notice.
Is there a consensus there?
Just for peace of mind, yeah.
Fellow commissioners?
Do you ever run into the situation where if you gave them 24-hour notice, they would, I mean, I don't want to cast aspersions, but they would hide whatever it was people were complaining about or something?
I would imagine that was the sort of piece of the puzzle behind will attempt, because in some situations, perhaps it is more beneficial to give no notice. But again, for regular compliance inspections and pre-licensure inspections, we absolutely give sufficient notice because we want to ensure that they're there.
So one of my questions further on is going to be that you deleted the language that says you could be, like a permit could be revoked for harm to public health and safety or something like that. Would it be possible to say something like, you give them 24-hour notice unless there's a potential harm to public health and safety? That would give you the ability to kind of, if there was some serious issue, you could still go ahead and do the inspection?
Certainly, and I mean, I think one of the things too, there is a difference between a regular compliance inspection and a inspection, or let's say going to a site more related to an instance of threats to public health and safety, which that's all really codified under Chapter 8 or Title 8. Where in the instance of threats to public health and safety, there is no advance notice required. So we can certainly work to tie those two together more effectively. But I like your suggestion where we could say Trinity County will give 24-hour notice of the inspection by posting the notice and or telephoning the number listed on the application, with the exception that in instances of, something like that.
Yeah. Because there's situations where there's like serial leaving lights on in greenhouses that they're supposed to have, but then if you say we're going to come and inspect you and they turn off the lights, that's a challenge in Junction City. They're supposed to have their lights off at nighttime or covered, and the lights continue to be on. And so sometimes you do need to be able to see those lights on.
Well, it's the difference between a code violation, suspected code violation, than a regular compliance inspection, right? So your annual compliance inspection, you're saying, hey, we're gonna come do our annual check, see how things are going, do that side of things. But a code violation inspection should have the opportunity to operate differently.
Right, which Drew said was covered in 8. So this is just compliance, then.
Okay.
They could give a 2-day notice.
So how about something to the effect
Or
of,
24-hour notice.
with the exception of immediate threats to public health and safety?
I'm fine with that.
Well, is the light issue on immediate health to public safety though? So it's still a violation, but it's not an immediate threat.
Yeah.
In past years, we have limitedly done nighttime compliance verification inspections for light pollution when complaints are received. That generally does not require entering the property.
Right, that's what I was thinking. You can do that from the road or something. Oh, in the microphone.
But are there other items within that spirit that would require going onto the property of a suspected violation that then would be outside of a regular inspection? Or do they all fall into the category of an inspection?
This is just compliance inspections, which are Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, excluding holidays. I mean, this is pretty specific.
Yeah. Okay.
And to do this with 24-hour notice doesn't seem like an issue.
I'm fine with the amendments to move on with that, as long as the fellow commissioners are. Yeah. Okay. So that is page 21. Move to 22.
So I had a question there. So at the very top, it says that you've deleted the language about a total of 530 licenses. So why was that deleted? Is there no limit now on the number of licenses?
Basically, 530 licenses was the basis for the development assumptions and evaluations in the program EIR. So from the perspective of the EIR, we're already limiting the total number of licenses / the total amount of development based on those assumptions calculated at 530. So I personally think that given the way that the development assumptions were constructed, we effectively have captured the maximum of 530 10,000 square foot licenses at 200% designated area. So that still lives on in the development assumptions. So, if we were to have a significant number of 500 square foot indoor licenses, let's say under the new provisions for stacking, it seems to potentially create a conflict with that just sort of numerical value of 530. So that I think is the rationale there.
But then, okay, but then you need to have some language that ties it back to the EIR in terms of, so that means there's X amount of whatever.
The other reason that that's removed there is this is the type 3 section.
But it's not put back in anywhere else. So, so to me, you either need to amend the EIR if you're going to allow more licenses, or you need to capture that language that you just described, that somehow the EIR limits it to essentially the equivalent of 500 licenses. Because otherwise, there's no telling whether or not you're going to exceed what was envisioned in the EIR.
Absolutely. And just for clarity's sake, the other reason that was removed for now is that, as we get into further building out the general plan EIR, we will ultimately zoning code will have to be consistent with the general plan and the general plan EIR. So that will certainly be addressed, but I think that somewhat arbitrary 530 license needs to be clarified and aligned with the general plan EIR. So noted, I agree, as we get forward into further developing the general plan EIR, there will definitely be some reference to whatever limitation is arrived at if the general plan EIR supplements the cannabis program EIR in that regard.
And likewise, I mean, I do think it's helpful to staff to have things clear cut, because if you put in the equivalent language and it is something like, well, you can have a total of so many square feet altogether of all the licenses or whatever, then staff has to start tracking all that kind of stuff. So I'm just, to me, 530 licenses, okay, I can figure that out. But I'm just thinking in terms of the applicants trying to figure it out and the staff trying to figure out, like, what is the equivalent amount that was considered in the EIR?
Absolutely. So noted, as we get further into the process, undoubtedly, we will do our best to clearly state whatever limitation is arrived at as we get through those environmental evaluations.
Thank you. Anything else on that page before I move on?
We did hear some public comment about the changes to the prioritization, which is OE, 0E there that's on the screen. I just wanted to give a bit of my rationale as to that change. Essentially, because historically we've allowed, in certain instances at least, a CCL number to be transferred, originally to a new location, more recently, post cannabis program EIR, you technically can't transfer a license to a new location, which you could effectively do previously. You can apply for a new license now, which I don't foresee in the foreseeable future, that we actually arrive at 530 active licenses in the county. If we were, then that would be a place where potentially the transfer of a license to a new location to allow for, expansion into larger scale cultivation could make sense. But basically what I was trying to address here is that simply having a low CCL number that may have been transferred to a new owner, I don't believe that should qualify an individual or an entity to be prioritized over an individual who maybe has a 200 CCL number, just as a numeric, value there, who's been active and compliant in the program for a handful of years. I don't think that just having CCL number 3 as another arbitrary number should create prioritization for the ability to get a 1 acre license. So that's why that's been revised.
Unless that current number 3 was current by the current owner or the previous owner and it was transferred fully current, wouldn't it stay in the same?
And that is why you see the changes given to those individuals that obtained a valid 2016-17 license.
So as long as you're enrolled or as long as you're current,
for those individuals.
that are current.
Yep.
Okay.
Which was the spirit of why there was a priority to begin with, to give preference to those who were in the program first, who had been going through all the had been going through all the uncertainty all the years when there was at that point there was only 5 1-acre licenses, something like that. There was a real restriction. What is the number now?
30.
So
30?
we're upping it to 30. And then I do want to also acknowledge that A and E are somewhat redundant and not perfectly aligned. So that was a revision made to just try and acknowledge the fact that we need to revise the prioritization strategy. I think A is kind of generally more in line with what I think is appropriate, but also want to make sure that we're, prioritizing people that were in the program, in the early stages of it, who've remained in the program.
I think if anything, you could reverse how A reads for the number of years an individual licensee has been actively enrolled in the program, and then their cannabis license number.
And I think if you read A and E together, we kind of get there.
Well, I'm saying that you inverse the order that A is written.
So so ranking the 2016-17 first, and then subsequent to that, sorry.
I'm not saying A and E, I'm saying inversing how line A is written. So putting the number of years ahead of the commercial cannabis license number
Copy.
as a proposal. Because that inherently does the same thing, but then you're prioritizing how long they've been in the program, which those who have had it since 2016 and 2017 would have the largest numbers. And then you're prioritizing those who enrolled and were in the program first to then be open to the other permits.
Okay.
Is there consensus on flip-flopping those? I mean, I think ultimately it needs a little bit more refinement to clearly, define exactly how we would sort of sort and prioritize based on 2 criteria.
Right.
Well, it says and, so, I mean,
Yeah.
doesn't really matter. I wouldn't think which way it went.
Let's move on. I'm on 23, unless there's a comment on page 22. But on page 23, section 2413, which is in proximity to high density areas and therefore create a substantial risk to public nuisance. Those are the findings for these opt-outs, and these findings need to be based in facts. We have CEQA that mitigates nuisances. We have 90,000 acres of lands that they're referring to as high density populations. We don't need to get into all the details and nuances, but we do need these opt-outs to be based. They need to be sound, to be legally sound, to be defendable. And the way they are right now feels very flimsy at best.
So, yeah, I totally disagree. And so I have a request. So we talked about scoping for the EIR for the general plan. So why doesn't the scoping go back and consider all the rationale for the opt-outs and document those findings? So for example, we heard today that residents count, but visitors don't. But if your economy is based on tourism, it's based on visitors coming. And if the visitors are saying, we're not coming because of the cannabis cultivation, then they need to be considered also. And so I think the consultant, when they're revising the general plan EIR, can be developing the findings that support the opt-out areas. I mean, we have letters from our major tourism attraction, KOA, in opposition to having the opt-out go away, because they bring literally thousands of people. There are times when there are more people at KOA than there are in the whole community.
We're not
And
talking
so-
about putting a farm around the KOA. We're,
But you are, if you look at the zoning,
the
you know,
the
Adrian-
KOA isn't that in the area of, in the town, in the high densities area?
it's at
That
the,
is a high
it's,
density area, but there,
it's at the periphery, so it's at the periphery.
Mhm.
There are ag lands. So you guys aren't familiar with the county, the community as I am. That's all I can say.
Mhm.
There are parcels that are at the periphery that would be allowed for cultivation. And so, and yeah, and again, high density is not the only reason to have a finding. I mean, if you look at what, if you look at what the opt-out areas that were added were allowed to consider, they were allowed to consider economic considerations. And I'm saying, I'm asking if the consultant doing the EIR for the general plan can't then consider economic considerations for the loss of tourism in an area that relies on tourism, because visitors have documented it. They've written letters, they've signed petitions saying they won't come. We have KOA saying they will lose business. We have Airbnbs writing letters saying they will lose business. That all needs to be considered in the EIR to provide the findings that you guys keep asking about. Now, and I just want to say also that when the Board of Supervisors adopted the EIR, it specifically says that those findings were the CEQA document. So the EIR assumed that those opt-outs existed. So you keep hammering on, we need findings, and I'm just telling you, the EIR already has them, and we can further refine those based on all the information that has been submitted when Recon, or whatever their name is, does the EIR for the general plan, right?
Chair, if I may.
Yep.
So at the last meeting, we had a significant amount of discussion on this, and I think there was, although not perfectly clear direction to staff, I think we've talked around this in terms of how do we quantify high density? How do we take into consideration the seasonal increase to, tourist-based, I don't know if population is quite the right word, but, density of humans, let's say. And so based on the direction from the last meeting, we have started the discussion about how to evaluate those findings. So I think we're pretty clear in terms of the general direction given to staff at the last meeting. And then I also want to respond to some of the public comment that we heard about why this was not included into the opt-out overlay. As I described at the last meeting, it was not clear to me that we could have an an overlay zone that had significantly different provisions applied. So clarified that at the last meeting, also clarified how a parcel would be able to come out of the opt-out through the rezoning process. So I feel like we've covered this, but if there are any other outstanding questions. So right now, this limitation section is slated to be removed from code, with the exception probably of the R123 zoning districts, and continuing to prevent cultivation in those high density or higher density residential zones with smaller parcel sizes. And so this section primarily will get moved into the overlay concept, if that helps to provide some clarity in terms of some of the questions that were posed in public comment.
Nice. Then we can move on. Also on page 23.
One,
Yep.
I have one comment on non-residents is how many of them would have actually sent a letter if they hadn't been contacted to send a letter. So
What
if you live in,
does that matter?
hold on,
What does that matter?
hold on. If you live in LA, do you even know what's going on with opt-out? Would you ever know unless you were contacted by someone to send a letter on it?
They were contacted based on the fact that they had they had visited this area.
Right.
So they have been here. So it's not just random people. Would you like to write this letter? It's
I know that, but if they weren't contacted, would they even have a clue about a cannabis opt-out or that there was even marijuana being grown somewhere close to them or not? I mean, they're in LA, they come to visit, they might not even notice at all.
I wonder, in
I don't want to
Mendocino
argue it. I
County-
just wanted to throw that out there that it just kind of seems, definitely base it on revenue from tourists for sure. But I just kind of wonder on the letters. I don't really put much faith in the letters just because they're all solicited, in my opinion.
There's an agenda, and there is places in Mendocino County and Southern Oregon, Jacksonville, the Williams, Oregon, Boonville, where it is beautiful tourist destinations where cannabis and wine coexist, and there isn't this constant fear and bickering. And so for some reason, their tourism isn't just dying over there. And so I wonder, this is unique up here. Maybe people come here specifically because it's not cannabis, and there's that.
Definitely.
So.
Definitely something to consider, yes.
Yeah. So I see that the buffer reduction will only be allowed for previously developed sites. And so that would be on page 23, D, land use buffer reductions. And so that's new.
No, that's not.
That's not new.
Nope. That it was established a year to 2 years ago when we established the cannabis land use buffer reduction. There are no changes to the existing ordinance language for this section. It's based on several meetings with Planning Commission and Board where we revised it and then revised it again. So happy to take in any comments, but that is not new. And I think the rationale for only allowing them on previous developed sites is that we want to get away from the issues that we've created historically by allowing cultivation sites in close proximity to adjacent dwellings. And there are, from what I understand, there are, historically there were 5,000 to 6,000 cultivation sites in the county when the programmatic EIR was prepared. In my mind, given that we're still, let's just say, in the realm of 530 licenses, there are ample previously developed cultivation sites for a new aspiring cultivator to choose from.
And that does not, so that buffer reduction does not apply to places where there's another cultivation site within that 350 feet.
So that's further down here. The following situations are considered exceptions from the required 350. Yep, on the next page, which I scroll to. So cultivator to cultivator is an exception. So if the adjacent legal dwelling has an active cultivation license, then the cultivator to cultivator exception applies. If there's a new construction, then that's another exception. So this again, we went through this, quite a few rounds in the last year or two when we arrived at this buffer reduction concept.
Okay, right on. Thank you. I don't have another comment until page 30.
I have one on page 27.
Make sure you use the mic.
So this gets to, so page 27, you've deleted the language after the date of written notification. So, and then I just have a general question about the whole notification and how long they have to address a code violation. So
Commissioner Fall, sorry, I'm not following what specific subsection you're referring to.
So it's D, so it's denial, section 1, 0.
That
That's
also-
page 27, page 27. That used to say the applicant shall be given a minimum of 7 business days after date of written notification to correct any deficiencies. And you deleted after date of written notification. And so this gets back to the 24-hour thing. So they have 7 days from when? I mean, shouldn't you give them written notification that they've done something that's going to potentially result in revocation of their permit?
Certainly. I think that's addressed in O or in 2. And that ties it back together with the NOV process that's detailed in 8.90, where under 8.90, we have to provide them, the NOV, which is written notification, and that's sent via certified mail.
Okay, so you deleted it there, but it's picked up somewhere else, is what you're saying?
I think that if I'm following what your concern is that we've addressed that in 2, as prescribed in 8.90130, which is the NOV process, which requires that they be notified, either posted to the gate or via certified mail.
And then you also deleted, if the deficiencies are deemed an immediate threat to environmental and/or public health and safety, they shall be corrected immediately.
And again, that is detailed in 8.90.
8.90, okay. Then when we get to 8.90, I got a question. Okay.
8.90 is a different title, and that is that is outside of zoning code.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Do you have any other
Nope,
30
that's it.
before page 30?
Um,
On page 30B, operational performance standards.
Like,
Thank you. Operational and performance standards on cannabis distribution. That was on 29, and now this on 30. I think we've had clarity on this, that cannabis distribution facilities shall not be allowed within 1,000 feet of the youth-oriented facilities, et cetera, et cetera. That is in alignment with the state, but the definition of a youth-oriented facility is what we've given you direction to clarify and work on, correct?
Yep, and if I remember correctly, it was to use the term that the state uses.
well, and to add, and documented. So they can't just advertise that they are serving youth. They have to provide some documentation of it.
Yeah, but with what the state regulations and definition of that. That was Commissioner Barrett provided clarity on those definitions. I have another comment on page 32, unless there's any comments before that.
Yeah, so again, at the bottom of page 31, so, and this carries on to all the denial, revocation of permits. So, item 1, it did say the applicant shall be given up to 7 business days. And now it says a minimum of 7 business days, but there's no maximum. So the person gets, you got a minimum of 7 days to fix it, but you could have up to 100 days or 300 days. Don't you mean a maximum of 7 days? For all those, every time you say denial, revocation of permit? How many days do they get to correct any deficiencies.
Is that in 890, 130?
Yeah, my recollection, and I can pull up 890 if that's helpful, is that under that NOV process section, that we allow for a minimum of 7 business days to correct it.
But there's no maximum then? They could take months?
In some instances, it would take months for them to correct a violation.
I think that's problematic. I mean, I really think that there should be a maximum time to correct
If it's
deficiencies.
helpful, I can jump over to 8.90, but essentially with the, except my recollection, and we can look at it more closely if that's helpful, although a bit outside of what we're trying to get through tonight, that for a standard notice of violation, they're given 7 days to correct. And
A maximum or minimum?
well, okay, so for under 8.90, they have 7 days to correct before incurring a monetary penalty.
Okay, so are you taking out everywhere it says denial revocation of permit in 1785? Are you going to take out the language about a minimum of 7 days and refer to 80, whatever it was, 90, 890?
90.
I mean, to me, it makes sense to put all the denial revocation of permit language in one section as opposed to repeating it for nurseries and for manufacturing and for distribution.
I absolutely agree with that, and this was kind of just still in the process of consolidating. So each of the standalone code sections that exist currently have a denial revocation section. So we just kind of left it there, but agreed that it doesn't need to be repeated 7 or 8 times.
Okay, so
And
if
that
you're going to put it in there once, then do you need to be referring to that other section and deleting this? Because it's very confusing when you say a minimum of 7 business days, because to me that means, okay, the clock doesn't start till 7 days after you got some sort of notification, and there's no time limit at all on when, the way this is written, there's no time limit at all on when you need to correct it.
So it'd be hard to put a time limit if you don't know what the violation is, because it would depend on
Well,
what it
that's
would take to fix
so
it.
if the time limits are in 890, then why don't you just refer to that?
The time limits in 8.90 are respective to the issuance of a monetary penalty once an NOV is issued. This is a bit distinct from that, where now we're talking about the denial or rescission. Ultimately, I would say that where we need to clarify this is not really even so much in this code section, but in probably the updates to the required conditions section as we further, because as I proposed this, it wasn't clear to me that there would be consensus on the conversion of licenses to use permits. So from my perspective, when we get into the new paradigm of use permits, there's going to be conditions of approval of that use permit in which that use permit would be invalidated based on non-compliance of the conditions of approval. So ultimately, it's a place undoubtedly where we need more refinement, because once we get into a more clear paradigm of dual track where there's a use permit and a program enrollment license, there's not really significant benefit to revoking the program enrollment license if the land use entitlement is still valid, because, and that's kind of part of the paradigm that we struggle with currently, where right now with the way denial revocation of a license is set up, there's nothing that would prevent an individual whose license was revoked from coming in the next day to reapply for the license.
Well, I was thinking more like Commissioner Flights pointed out. So somebody has a lighting issue. They have the lights on at night when they're not supposed to. And so you get complaints, you go to your code inspection or whatever, and you send them a letter or email or whatever, and you say, you got your lights on at night and it's too bright. It doesn't take them a year to fix that, but with the way this is worded, they
Agreed.
have that amount of time.
Agreed, it doesn't take a year. But as we talked about light pollution, we encountered some scenarios where the tarps were ripped due to like a windstorm. And so it's certainly possible that depending on the size of the greenhouse and the size of the tarps they need, that it's going to take them more than 7 business days to acquire new tarps.
Isn't it with other code violations, like with building, it's like 21 days, substantially longer?
So I would just recommend that we consolidate this to say that the violations are consistent with chapter 8.90 and allow that to ride and stop talking about the violations in this section. What we really need to talk about is the denial and revocation, because those are not covered in chapter 8.90.
And I agree, and that is my note, refer to 8.90. And also really where that gets built out is in the conditions of approval of the use permit in terms of the invalidation of that land use entitlement based on a set of criteria.
Okay.
And I would agree that if you already have a disturbed area with an allowed use, allow that to continue if a new owner were to come in without violations and wanted to pursue that use. Let's not disturb more land for a similar use. Let's reuse the already disturbed lands.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
So we move, see, just some clarity on page 32, fees and for cannabis distribution, that is it a continuance of $1,000 from 6,000 plus $1,000 goes to the general plan update. Is that $1,000 that still continuing to pay for this general plan update?
So I apologize for this cannabis distribution fee section. I believe the rest of the fee sections refer out to the fee code where fees are established. To your question specifically, the general plan update fee has been revised down to $75 for all cannabis land uses as of some months back when we did the updates to the fee code. 2.64050, if I remember correctly.
Nice.
Yep.
Okay. So it mentions unclassified under cannabis manufacturing facilities licensed as microbusiness involving type 6. Is that going, just unclassified, going to be removed from that?
Yep.
Okay. Page 33. Yeah. Or words on high density. We don't need to discuss that.
And again, this is just, carryover from the existing ordinances, and this
Yeah.
will be consolidated. Whereas as you see it currently, right, the limitations on location to cultivate, where we establish the prohibition of cultivation in Whiskey Town or Ruth Lake lease lots, that was only applied originally to cultivation. And then as these other ordinances were built out, that was included here, but this would definitely end up being consolidated into the overall section of cannabis land uses, which I don't recall the page, but it's earlier on in what we've covered.
Are you at page 35 yet?
I'm going through, I am at, I don't have anything until page 54 actually, so.
Just a minor technical thing. So page 35 and thereafter, you talk about Coupa. So I'm reading from the state Coupa page. So as of July 1st, 2025, the Department of Toxic Substances Control will no longer administer the Trinity Coupa. Instead, the Trinity County Division of Environmental Health will be the new administrators. Blah, blah, blah. So I know that because the fire department has to do Coupa now with environmental health. So I think you can take DTSC out of the definitions.
Yes, thank you.
And wherever it's got Coupa, it's now Trinity County Environmental Health is our Coupa administrator.
We might, and I'll review that with environmental health. We might still need to retain the DTSC definition, as there may be reference out to those standards that are established through DTSC for the statewide Coupa program, but agreed. And thank you that it is currently administered in Trinity County by Trinity County Environmental Health Division.
I had a question on page 38. So again, denial, revocation of permit. You deleted language that says the applicant engages in site or building improvements specific to the use before the appropriate use permit has been issued or before the licensee's requested changes have been approved. Do you know why that was deleted?
Are you saying that it's deleted but not reflected in track changes?
Yes, it's just totally gone.
I honestly don't. I would say that was an omission.
Okay, there was another paragraph there. That's all I have.
Yeah, cool, right on.
Except there's no findings for non-storefront retail.
Storefront retail, but we already discussed use permits on store, highway, commercial. It's already been discussed. So, if you can provide me some clarity on just the area of the Lewiston expansion opt-out zone that limits retail. Is that the town of Lewiston? The downtown where the gas station?
Nope.
That is not. That is the expansion. That must be One Maple Winery area.
Yeah, I mean, the downtown where the commercial is and all that, that was part of one of the original opt-outs. The Community Services District.
If it's helpful, I can pull up Parcel Viewer and show you what Lewiston expansion area is. To my recollection, it's like a block that's west of the main rectangle that is the Lewiston CSD.
That's okay. I don't have anything else either.
I just had a clarification. So we're defining what an illicit grow is in part of the denial and revocation sections. For consistency, can't we just put that into the definitions?
Yes.
Is there anything else for staff before we move on to planning commissioner reports? Okay, we'll move on to planning commissioner reports. Fellow commissioners, do you have anything to report on?
I do. Kind of a personal thing. So at the last Planning Commission meeting, Um, my husband, Pat Frost, was here to talk about the opt-out areas. Before he had a chance to do that, he was threatened and intimidated twice, actually, before he had a chance to talk. And then as he was leaving, threatened to the point where it aggravated an existing medical condition that could have caused severe harm, severe consequences. And sorry, but that is wrong. I want to say, that was a particular individual, and I don't attribute that to the cannabis community as a whole. I want to make that clear. Because, the cannabis community, there are wonderful people. I appreciate their comments. I do my best to keep a certain balance between their concerns and their comments versus what my constituents are telling me. I voted for and against projects and tried to resolve some issues. And I just want to say we're constantly asked to be tolerant, open-minded, kind of look at the big picture. And having my family threatened is kind of counterproductive. I'm doing my best to keep open-minded, but it just makes it harder. So please stop. That's what I wanted to say. Thanks.
I'm sorry to hear that.
He could have gotten killed. And just not cool.
Fellow commissioners?
I'd just like to reiterate through, as this goes forward for Mentor Harnish and for staff, that less is more. And Trinity County doesn't need more regulation, so keep that in mind.
Yeah, it's been brought to my attention, just like how long these projects are with CUPs and DUPs are taking, and the California Permitting Streamline Act. And I guess I'd just, like to know if our programs are working within those, how those government codes affect our ability to regulate projects. I know this had an effect on our on the telecommunication project, maybe not, but staff, would you mind giving some clarity on that act and how it pertains to the programs?
Yes, the Permit Streamlining Act only applies to housing development, and only if that housing development, if the applicant requests it. And on our website, we do have a section where it explains the different requirements in order for the Permit Streamline Act to apply. And to fill.
Hey, please disrupt. You can disrupt. Hey, that's enough. You can talk to people offline. I'm sorry about that.
And that is a worksheet that we came up with Mentor Harnish, and specifically Ryan, who deals with like housing related concepts and has been working with us on the pro-housing designation.
So you're saying that the California Permitting Streamlining Act does not pertain to business-related projects, only to housing?
Correct. Like anyone applying for like even like a building permit for a house could request that be enacted.
Okay.
And then, but that also primarily applies to jurisdictions that have discretionary permits for housing development in general, which Trinity County allows like single-family dwellings as a use allowed by right in most areas. And then for like multifamily housing, if they're asking to build like an apartment complex there, Trinity County doesn't require a conditional use permit or a discretionary permit in general. It's allowed by right as long as they meet certain like threshold setbacks, parking.
Okay. Right on. Thank you for that. Drew?
That is not my understanding. So again, we'll have to do some homework. My understanding is that the Permit Streamlining Act applies to discretionary projects in general, where from my understanding, there is some confusion in terms of what's been communicated in public comment. And my understanding of the Permit Streamlining Act is that the Permit Streamlining Act does not apply to the timeline related to accomplished CEQA. So if the Permit Streamlining Act, as it relates to application completeness in the first 30 days, we basically have to communicate to an applicant if there are elements of an application which need additional, where we have deemed an application to be incomplete, we have to do that within 30 days for discretionary projects under the Permit Streamlining Act. However, if through the process of environmental review, there are deficiencies or inadequacies to the the additional studies that are performed, or in terms of kind of the back and forth that often occurs between staff and applicants or their consultants, that can go on for an extended period of time. And again, to my understanding of it, that is not subject to the time limitations under the Permit Streamlining Act. So we'll definitely dig into that. I'm also not so sure that the Permit Streamlining Act applies to licenses. So in the current paradigm, we'll do some more homework.
Is there any chance that county council's available or not?
So
Probably
from
not this
my
hour.
quick Googling and looking at California state law, it applies to development projects, which is construction, rebuilding, and not to operations, to permit operations, so actions. So it needs to be associated with the building or modifications of such.
Right. And again, I think there's some gray area, and obviously we got more homework to do there. But, the development of a project, which is a discretionary land use, I believe constructing a huge horticulture greenhouse operation would be still a development project. So.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. And also, could you provide some insight into what will be on the next Planning Commission's agenda?
Are you guys done with commissioner report outs? Yeah.
That's yes.
Okay. If I may jump us back into one section of cannabis code that I want to provide an update on, I guess.
Sure.
So at the last meeting, we discussed doing updates to the personal cultivation section, which is currently 1742. Last week, I met with HHSA staff who administer the medical marijuana ID card program for the County of Trinity. And so what we are going to propose is that, yes, there will be an allowance for medical marijuana caregiverships included into what is currently the, personal cultivation section to align with state law. However, from a zoning perspective, we are going to retain the existing square footages based on parcel size. So if you're on a small parcel, and I can pull it back up, but I want to say parcels of 1 to 2 acres are allowed 100 or 200 square feet, you would still be able to do a caregiver, but you would be restricted to the maximum allowable square footage for the number of plants, which I believe is 6 per patient, up to 5 total for a caregiver. So let's say a maximum of 30 plants, but the square footage restrictions based on parcel size would still be applied. So that is where we intend to go in proposing that and adding that into the personal growth section. Just want to give that update to some of the public comment that we received this evening. To your question for the next planning commission, I don't know that we have anything scheduled for the first meeting in April. So for the second meeting in April, the notices will go out to the Trinity Journal next Friday. And I believe we will have 2 or 3 cannabis projects to be presented. I don't remember the specific types of projects, but I want to say one is a distribution, one is a sort of combined, pre-existing multi-use project, and one is either an additional distribution or a processing license. And then is it now time for Community Development Department Director report outs? So I just want to restate what I conveyed earlier, which is on May 19th from 2 to 9, we will be having a special zoning code study session with the Board of Supervisors, and on May 20th from 9 to 5, an all-day special study session here in board chambers. And the only other thing that I want to share is that I have passed the torch of Cannabis Division Director to an existing staff member, Daniel Marvel, who is now the Acting Cannabis Division Director. And thank you all again for the many, many hours of review of zoning code, and look forward to those May meetings where we'll have a bunch more hours, and I imagine more after that to follow to get through all of zoning code.
Right on. Okay. Meeting adjourned.